In the shadowed heart of Ravenwood Hall, Hercule Poirot faces a deadly game orchestrated by a faceless mastermind. A cryptic letter lures him to a secluded manor where every guest hides a secret and every room conceals a trap. As the clock ticks toward midnight, riddles turn lethal, betrayals unravel, and a chilling question looms. Who among them is the predator, and who is the prey? Will Poirot's brilliant mind outwit a killer's cunning, or will this be the case that buries him? The game begins. Dare you follow? Chapter 1. The Invitation to Danger. The late afternoon sun cast a golden hue over the cobblestone streets of London, its rays filtering through the heavy drapes of Hercule Poirot's impeccably tidy apartment at Whitehaven Mansions. The Belgian detective, with his meticulously groomed moustache and polished patent leather shoes, sat at his mahogany desk, sorting through a small stack of correspondence with the precision of a surgeon. His movements were deliberate, each envelope opened with a silver letter opener, each letter read with the intensity of a man accustomed to finding secrets in the mundane. The air carried the faint aroma of coffee, brewed to Poirot's exacting standards, and the soft ticking of a grandfather clock marked the passage of time. It was a day like any other, or so it seemed, until Poirot's fingers paused on an envelope unlike the others. It was not the usual cream-coloured stationery of his acquaintances or the formal letterhead of a client. This envelope was heavy, made of thick, textured paper the colour of aged ivory, sealed with a wax stamp bearing an unfamiliar cresta-coiled serpent entwined around a quill. Poirot's green eyes narrowed. He turned the envelope over, noting the absence of a return address. The handwriting, in bold black ink, was elegant yet forceful, as if the writer had pressed the pen with intent. It was addressed simply, Monsieur Hercule Poirot, Whitehaven Mansions, London. No title, no pleasantries, just his name and address in a script that seemed to demand attention. Hercule Poirot murmured, his voice soft but laced with intrigue. He broke the seal, careful not to disturb the wax, and extracted a single sheet of paper. The letter was brief, its words chosen with precision. Monsieur Poirot, your reputation as a man of unparalleled intellect precedes you. I invite you to a gathering at Ravenwood Hall, Yorkshire, on the 15th of this month. A matter of great consequence awaits, one that will test the limits of your little grey cells. Come alone. Discretion is paramount. A car will collect you at precisely 8 a.m. on the appointed day. Yours in anticipation. A friend Poirot's moustache twitched as he reread the letter, his mind already dissecting its contents. No signature, no hint of the sender's identity. Yet the tone carried an air of confidence, perhaps even arrogance. The phrase "test the limits of your little grey cells" struck him as both a compliment and a challenge. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled, and stared at the letter as if it might reveal its secrets under scrutiny. Who is this friend? He mused aloud. And why Ravenwood Hall? He knew of the place, a grand but isolated estate in the Yorkshire moors, owned by the reclusive Lord Reginald Ashburn, a man rumoured to have more enemies than friends. Poirot had never met Lord Ashburn, but whispers of his eccentricities, his obsession with rare artefacts, and his penchant for hosting exclusive gatherings had reached even the detective's ears. Was Ashburn the friend, or was this an elaborate ruse? Poirot set the letter aside and rose, pacing the room with measured steps. His apartment, with its orderly shelves and gleaming surfaces, was a sanctuary of logic, yet this letter disrupted that order. He disliked mysteries that concealed their players, but he could not deny the spark of curiosity igniting within him. A challenge to his intellect was not something he could easily dismiss. He glanced at the clock. It was nearing 5 o'clock, and his old friend Captain Arthur Hastings was due for tea. Hastings, with his earnest demeanour and unwavering loyalty, often served as a sounding board for Poirot's theories, even if his contributions were more enthusiastic than insightful. Perhaps discussing the letter with Hastings would clarify Poirot's thoughts. As if on cue, a knock sounded at the door. Poirot adjusted his tie, smoothed his jacket, and called "Entrez." Hastings entered, his face flushed from the autumn. Chill, his tweed coat slightly askew. "Poirot, old chap. Sorry, I'm a bit late. Got caught up at the club bit of a row over the cricket scores." He grinned, shaking off his coat and hanging it on the rack. Poirot waved a hand dismissively. "The cricket, it is of no consequence, mon ami. But this," he held up the letter, his eyes gleaming. "This is a matter most intriguing." Hastings took the letter, his brow furrowing as he read, "Ravenwood Hall. Sounds a bit ominous, doesn't it? And this friend business no name, no nothing. Could be a trap, Poirot." "Precisement," Poirot replied, his voice low. "But a trap for whom and to what end? That is the question. The mind that crafted this letter is not ordinary. It seeks to provoke, to challenge, and Hercule Poirot does not refuse a challenge." Hastings frowned, handing the letter back. "You're not seriously thinking of going, are you? Alone, to some remote manor, with no idea who's behind it? Sounds like a recipe for trouble." Poirot smiled, a small, enigmatic smile. "Trouble, Hastings, is where the truth often hides. I will go to Ravenwood Hall, but I will not go unprepared." Over tea, Poirot and Hastings discussed the letter at length. Hastings, ever cautious, urged Poirot to inform the police, or at least bring him along, but Poirot was firm. The letter specified he come alone, and he would honour that for now. He did, however, make discreet inquiries through his contacts at Scotland Yard. Learning that Ravenwood Hall had recently changed hands after Lord Ashburn's death 6 months prior, the new owner, a shadowy figure known only as Mr. Blackwood, had kept a low profile, hosting no public events until now. This information only deepened Poirot's curiosity. Why would a man who shunned attention suddenly invite a detective of his caliber to his estate? And why the secrecy? Poirot spent the next few days preparing, reviewing maps of Yorkshire, studying the history of Ravenwood Hall, and ensuring his affairs were in order. He packed lightly, but included a small notebook, his favourite fountain pen, and a concealed pocket-knee for precaution he rarely admitted to carrying. On the morning of the 15th, precisely at 8 a.m., a sleek black Rolls-Royce pulled up outside Whitehaven Mansions. The driver, a tall man with a scar across his cheek and eyes hidden behind dark glasses, said nothing beyond confirming Poirot's identity. Poirot, dressed in a tailored overcoat and carrying a single leather valise, stepped into the car, his expression unreadable. The journey to Yorkshire was long, the roads winding through misty moors that seemed to stretch endlessly under a leaden sky. Poirot observed the landscape in silence, his mind turning over the letter's words. The driver offered no conversation, and Poirot did not press him. Instead, he noted the man's calloused hands, the faint scent of tobacco, and the way his shoulders tensed when they passed other vehicles. Details, Poirot knew, were the threads of truth. As dusk approached, the car turned onto a narrow lane flanked by ancient oaks. Ahead loomed Ravenwood Hall, its Gothic silhouette stark against the fading light. The manor was a sprawling edifice of weathered stone, its towers and gables giving it the air of a fortress. Ivy clung to its walls, and the windows glowed faintly, as if guarding secrets within. The car stopped at the grand entrance, where a butler awaited, his face pale and expressionless. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, bowing slightly. "You are expected. Please, follow me." Poirot stepped out, his shoes crunching on the gravel. He glanced back at the driver, who was already pulling away, then followed the butler into the manor. The heavy oak doors closed behind him with a thud that echoed like a warning. Inside, the hall was opulent yet oppressive, its high ceilings adorned with chandeliers that flickered with candlelight. Portraits of stern-faced ancestors lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow Poirot as he walked. The butler led him to a grand drawing-room where a fire roared in a massive hearth. Several figures stood or sat within, their conversations halting as Poirot entered. There were 6 other guests, each as distinct as characters in a play. A woman in a crimson gown, her eyes sharp and calculating, introduced herself as Lady Evelyn. Carlyle, a widow with a reputation for scandal, a burly man with a military bearing, Colonel Marcus Trent, nodded curtly, his hand resting on a cane that seemed more weapon than aid. A young artist, Miss Clara Duval, fidgeted with her sketchbook, her nervous energy palpable. Dr. Simon Hargrove, a bespectacled physician, offered a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mr. Victor Langston, a businessman with a slick demeanor, sipped brandy and watched Poirot closely. And finally, Miss Beatrice Lyle, a quiet librarian, clutched a book as if it were a shield. The butler announced that dinner would be served shortly, and that Mr. Blackwood would join them then. Poirot observed the group, noting their unease, their sidelong glances, and the way they avoided mentioning the letter each had surely received. He had no doubt they, too, had been summoned by the mysterious friend. Dinner was a tense affair, served in a dining room that could have seated 50 but felt cavernous with only 7 guests. The food was exquisite pheasant, truffled potatoes, and a fine Bordeaux, but the atmosphere was heavy. No one spoke of the letters or the purpose of their gathering, though Poirot sensed they all knew more than they let on. That as the meal ended, the butler reappeared, carrying a silver tray with a single envelope identical to the one Poirot had received. He placed it before an empty chair at the head of the table and withdrew. The guests exchanged glances, but no one moved until Poirot, with a calm authority, reached for the envelope and opened it. The letter inside was written in the same bold hand. "Welcome, Monsieur Poirot and esteemed guests. Tonight begins a game of wits, a test of survival. One among you is my instrument, another my target. The rest are pawns in a grand design. Solve my riddles, evade my traps, and you may live to see the dawn. Fail, and Ravenwood Hall will be your tomb." The first challenge awaits in the library at midnight. The room fell silent, the crackling fire the only sound. Lady Carlisle's glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. Colonel Trent's grip tightened on his cane. Miss Duval gasped, and Dr. Hargrove's smile vanished. Langston swore under his breath, while Miss Lyle's book fell to the table. Poirot folded the letter, his expression serene but his mind racing. "Mise et miss," he said, his voice cutting through the tension. "It appears we are players in a most dangerous game. But fear not, Hercule Poirot does not lose at games of the mind." As midnight approached, the guests gathered in the library, a vast room lined with bookshelves that stretched to the ceiling. A single candelabrum illuminated a table where a locked box sat, its surface engraved with a serpent and quill. Beside it was a note: "Solve the riddle within 1 hour, or the air will turn to poison." Poirot's eyes gleamed. The game had begun, and he would not be outwitted. But as he studied the box, the guests, and the shadows that seemed to move in the flickering light, he knew one thing for certain: the mastermind was watching, and the first move had been made. Narrative continued to unfold, detailing Poirot's initial attempts to decipher the riddle on the box, a complex cipher involving literary references and numerical patterns. He engaged the guests, probing their reactions to gauge their involvement, while the oppressive atmosphere of Ravenwood Hall heightened the stakes. The chapter explored Poirot's methodical approach, his observations of the guests' behaviors, and the growing sense that the mastermind was not only testing his intellect but orchestrating a deeper, more personal vendetta. The tension built as the hour ticked down, culminating in Poirot unlocking the box just as the air grew heavy, revealing a key and a map hinting at the manor's secrets, setting the stage for the next challenge. Chapter 2: The Gathering of Suspects. The heavy oak doors of Blackthorn Manor creaked open, revealing a cavernous hall bathed in the flickering glow of a chandelier. Hercule Poirot stepped inside, his polished shoes clicking on the marble floor, his moustache impeccably trimmed as always. The air carried a faint scent of old wood and wax, mingled with something less tangible: tension, perhaps, or the promise of secrets waiting to be uncovered. His sharp eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail: the ornate tapestries depicting hunting scenes, the polished silver candelabras, and the grand staircase that spiraled upward into shadow. The invitation, written in an elegant but cryptic hand, had promised a challenge, and Poirot was not one to ignore such a summons. A butler, tall and gaunt, with a face like a weathered gravestone, bowed slightly. "Monsieur Poirot, welcome to Blackthorn Manor. The other guests are in the drawing room. If you would follow me." Poirot inclined his head, adjusting his perfectly tailored coat. "Mercy, my good man. Lead on." The butler guided him through a corridor lined with portraits, their eyes seeming to follow his every step. Poirot noted the details: the faded gilt frames, the stern expressions of long-dead aristocrats, and the faint dust on the edges, suggesting neglect despite the manor's grandeur. His mind, always active, catalogued these observations, sensing they might prove significant. The drawing room was a study in opulence, with velvet drapes, a roaring fire, and a long table set with crystal glasses and a decanter of ruby-red wine. 7 figures stood or sat, their postures betraying varying degrees of unease or curiosity. Poirot's arrival drew their attention, and he felt the weight of their scrutiny as he entered. The butler announced, "Monsieur Hercule Poirot," before retreating silently. Poirot offered a small, courteous smile. "Bonsoir, madame, et messieurs. It is a pleasure to make your acquaintance, though the circumstances, they are most intriguing, Nan." A woman near the fireplace, dressed in a sleek emerald gown, stepped forward. Her auburn hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, and her green eyes sparkled with intelligence. "Monsieur Poirot, your reputation precedes you. I'm Lady Eleanor Whitmore, the hostess of this gathering, though I confess I'm as much a guest in this game as you are." Poirot bowed slightly. "Lady Whitmore, enchant. And this game, as you call it, what do you know of its architect?" Her smile faltered, a shadow crossing her face. "Very little, I'm afraid. The invitation came to me, as it did to you, with a promise of intellectual stimulation. but I suspect there's more at play." Poirot's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing, turning instead to study the others. Each guest, he sensed, was a piece in a puzzle he had yet to fully comprehend. He began his mental catalogue, as was his habit, observing their appearances, mannerisms, and the subtle cues that betrayed their inner thoughts. To Lady Whitmore's left stood a man in his late 40s, broad-shouldered and impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit. His face was weathered, with deep lines etched around his mouth, and his grey eyes held a guarded intensity. "Colonel Rupert Hargreaves," he introduced himself, his voice clipped and militarily, "retired Royal Artillery." "I don't care for games, Poirot, but I'm here to see this through," Colonel Poirot said, noting the man's rigid posture and the faint tremor in his right hand, suggesting either nerves or a lingering injury. "Your presence adds a certain discipline to the proceedings." Next was a young woman, older than 25, with pale blonde hair cascading in loose waves. She wore a simple but elegant cream dress, and her blue eyes darted nervously around the room. "Miss Clara Henshaw," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm a governess. I don't know why I was invited." Poirot's gaze softened, but his mind was sharp. Her timidity seemed genuine, but he knew better than to trust first impressions. "Mademoiselle Henshaw, your modesty is charming, but I suspect you have depths yet to be revealed." A man in his 30s, leaning against a bookcase with a glass of wine in hand, gave a wry smile. His dark hair was slightly dishevelled, and his tweed jacket suggested a casual disregard for formality. "Dr. Julian Baxter," he said, raising his glass. "I'm a historian, specializing in medieval cryptography. Whoever sent that invitation knows my work, it seems." "Cryptography, Doctor?" Poirot's moustache twitched. "A most fascinating field. Perhaps our host has need of such expertise." A woman in her 50s, seated near the fire, adjusted her spectacles and looked up from a leather-bound book. Her grey hair was pulled into a severe bun, and her expression was one of mild disdain. "Mrs. Agatha Pennington," she said curtly. "I write novels, detective novels, to be precise. I suspect this is some publicity stunt, though I'll humour it for now." Poirot's eyes gleamed with amusement. "Madame Pennington, your stories, they are known to me. Perhaps you will find inspiration here, though I hope the reality is less perilous than your fiction." A younger man, wiry and restless, paced near the window. His dark eyes flicked to Poirot, and he ran a hand through his tousled brown hair. "Victor Malone," he said brusquely. "Journalist, I smell a story here, and I'm not leaving until I get it." "Monsieur Malone," Poirot said, noting the man's nervous energy and the ink stains on his fingers. A journalist's curiosity is a powerful tool, but it can also lead one into danger. Finally, a man in his 60s, seated in a backed chair, rose slowly. His silver hair was neatly combed, and his tailored suit spoke of wealth. His eyes, however, were cold and calculating. "Sir Reginald Thorne," he said, his voice smooth but edged with arrogance. "I own several enterprises, including this manor, though I rarely visit. I was persuaded to attend." Poirot tilted his head. "Sir Reginald, your presence here is most intriguing. A man of your stature does not answer such summons lightly." The group fell silent, each guest sizing up the others. Poirot felt the undercurrent of suspicion, the unspoken questions hanging in the air. Why had they been brought here? What connected them? And who was the mastermind behind this gathering? Lady Whitmore clapped her hands, breaking the tension. Shall we dine? The staff has prepared a meal, and perhaps over food we can discuss this unusual situation. The guests moved to the dining room, a long candlelit space with a table set for 8. Poirot took his seat, observing the dynamics. Lady Whitmore sat at the head, exuding charm but with a guarded edge. Colonel Hargreaves sat ramrod straight, his eyes scanning the room as if expecting an ambush. Clara Henshaw kept her head down, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Dr. Baxter sipped his wine, his casual demeanor masking a keen alertness. Mrs. Pennington's sharp gaze missed nothing, her pen poised over a small notebook. Victor Malone fidgeted, glancing at the windows as if tempted to bolt. Sir Reginald, at the opposite end, exuded an air of detached superiority. The meal began with a consomme, the delicate broth served in porcelain bowls. Poirot sipped his, noting the exquisite flavor but also the faint tremor in the butler's hand as he poured. The staff, he observed, were as much a part of this mystery as the guests. He made a mental note to investigate their backgrounds. Poirot's expression softened, but his words were measured. Mademoiselle, danger is always a possibility when secrets are at play. But fear not, Hercule Poirot is here, and he does not fail. Dr. Baxter chuckled. Confidence, eh? I like that. But what's the game? That invitation mentioned a challenge, but it was vague. I'm betting it's a puzzle, something to test our wits. Mrs. Pennington's pen scratched against her notebook. A puzzle or a trap? I've written enough villains to know they love theatrics. Victor Malone leaned forward, his eyes bright. Theatrics or not, someone's gone to a lot of trouble. This manor, the staff, the invitations, it's orchestrated. I'd kill for a lead on who's behind it. Sir Reginald raised an eyebrow. Careful with your words, Mr. Malone. In a place like this, they might be taken literally. The table fell silent, the weight of his words settling over them. Poirot's mind raced, analyzing each guest's reaction. Lady Whitmore's smile was tight. Colonel Hargreaves' jaw clenched. Clara's hands trembled. Dr. Baxter's eyes narrowed. Mrs. Pennington's pen paused. Victor Malone flushed, and Sir Reginald's expression remained unreadable. The main course arrived, roast pheasant with truffle sauce, but before anyone could take a bite, a low, mechanical hum filled the room. The chandelier flickered, and a panel in the wall slid open, revealing a gramophone. The needle dropped, and a voice, distorted and chilling, echoed through the room. Welcome, guests, to my game, the voice said, each word dripping with menace. You are here because you are pieces in my puzzle, and Hercule Poirot, you are the prize. Tonight, you will face the first of my challenges. Fail, and one of you will not see the dawn. Succeed, and you may yet unravel my identity. The game begins now. The gramophone clicked off, and the panel slid shut. The guests froze, their eyes darting to Poirot. He rose, his calm demeanor unshaken. Mise Amos, it seems our host is impatient. Let us be vigilant. The game, it is afoot. The rest of the meal was abandoned as the guests erupted into questions and accusations. Colonel Hargreaves demanded to know who had access to the gramophone. Clara Henshaw clutched her napkin, whispering about leaving. Dr. Baxter suggested searching the room for clues. Mrs. Pennington scribbled furiously, muttering about plot twists. Victor Malone paced, muttering about a scoop. Sir Reginald sipped his wine, unmoved. Lady Whitmore called for calm, but her voice trembled. Poirot raised a hand, silencing them. Madame et Monsieur's panic is the enemy of reason. We must observe. We must think. The mastermind has revealed their presence, but they have also revealed their weakness. They crave the challenge, and Hercule Poirot, he does not lose at such games. He began to pace, his eyes scanning the room. The gramophone's panel was seamless, suggesting a mechanism known only to the manor's architect or someone with intimate knowledge of its secrets. He noted the guests' positions during the message. None had been near the panel, ruling out immediate tampering. The staff, however, had vanished during the commotion. Poirot made a mental note to question them. Lady Whitmore, he said, turning to her. This manor, it belongs to Sir Reginald, yet you are the hostess. How did this arrangement come to be? She hesitated, her fingers tightening around her glass. Sir Reginald lent me the manor for this gathering. The invitation instructed me to act as hostess, and I agreed, thinking it a harmless diversion, sir. Reginald nodded. I rarely use this pile. When Lady Whitmore requested it, I saw no reason to refuse. Poirot's moustache twitched. And yet, Sir Reginald, you are here. A coincidence, perhaps. Sir Reginald's eyes hardened. I received my own invitation. I came to protect my interests. Poirot nodded, filing away the response. He turned to the group. Each of you, tell me, what did your invitation say? The exact words, if you please. One by one, they recounted the messages, each similar yet tailored. Lady Whitmore's spoke of a test of charm and wit. Colonel Hargreaves mentioned honour and strategy. Clara's hinted at hidden strengths. Dr. Baxter's referenced ancient puzzles. Mrs. Pennington's promised a story worth writing. Victor Malone's dangled the prospect of a career-defining exposé. Sir Reginald's spoke of power and legacy. Poirot's own had been a direct challenge. Outwit me or perish. There is a pattern, Poirot murmured. Each invitation appeals to your nature, your desires. The mastermind knows you well too well, perhaps. The evening wore on, with Poirot questioning each guest subtly, probing for connections. Lady Whitmore revealed she had once been engaged to a man who vanished under mysterious circumstances. Colonel Hargreaves admitted to a court-martial in his past, quickly glossing over it. Clara spoke of a wealthy employer who died unexpectedly. Dr. Baxter mentioned a rival in his field who had sabotaged his work. Mrs. Pennington hinted at a plagiarism scandal. Victor Malone confessed to a story that ruined a powerful man's reputation. Sir Reginald was cagey, admitting only to business rivals. Poirot's mind worked furiously, weaving a tapestry of motives and connections. The mastermind had chosen these guests for a reason, but what? A shared enemy? A past crime? Or was it simply to toy with Poirot himself? As midnight approached, the guests grew restless. Poirot suggested they retire, but remained vigilant. Lock your doors, Mies Amos, he said, and trust no one until we know more. The group dispersed, their footsteps echoing in the silent manor. Poirot lingered in the drawing room, examining the gramophone panel. It was locked, the mechanism hidden. He tapped the wall, listening for hollow spots, but found none. His fingers brushed a nearby bookshelf, and he paused, noticing a faint misalignment in the spines. He pulled a volume of Dante's Inferno, and a soft click sounded. The shelf shifted, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Poirot's heart quickened, but he did not hesitate. He took a candelabra from the table and descended, the air growing colder with each step. The staircase led to a small chamber, its walls lined with papers and maps. A desk held a single sheet, scrawled with a message. "You are quick, Poirot, but not quick enough. The first trap awaits." He examined the papers, finding diagrams of the manor, guest lists, and cryptic notes about each person present. One word stood out, repeated in the margins: revenge. Poirot's lips pressed into a thin line. The mastermind's motive was becoming clearer, but the danger was far from over. He returned to the drawing room, locking the shelf behind him. The manor was silent, but Poirot knew it was a false calm. The mastermind was watching, waiting for the next move, and Hercule Poirot, with his little grey cells, was ready to meet the challenge. The night passed uneasily, with Poirot retiring to his room but sleeping little. His mind churned, piecing together the fragments of the evening. The guests, the manor, the message all, were parts of a grand design. He rose at dawn, his resolve unshaken, and began his investigation anew. Over breakfast, the guests were subdued, their eyes heavy with suspicion. Poirot observed them closely, noting new details: Lady Whitmore's forced cheer, Colonel Hargreaves' clenched fist, Clara's pale face, Dr. Baxter's distracted air, Mrs. Pennington's sharp glances, Victor Malone's nervous tapping, and Sir Reginald's icy calm. The staff, too, moved with a quiet efficiency that bordered on secrecy. Poirot decided to explore the manor, starting with the library. Its shelves towered to the ceiling, filled with leather-bound tomes and dusty manuscripts. He examined the books, finding nothing unusual until he noticed a faint mark on the floor, a scuff, as if something heavy had been moved. He knelt, tracing the mark to a rug, which he lifted to reveal a trapdoor. It was locked, but the mechanism was similar to the gramophone panel. Poirot made a note to return with tools. Next, he visited the conservatory, its glass walls fogged with morning dew. Among the exotic plants, he found a torn piece of paper, half buried in a pot. It bore a single word: checkmate. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The mastermind was leaving breadcrumbs, daring him to follow. He continued his search, moving through the manor's labyrinthine corridors. In the ballroom, he found a hidden panel behind a mirror containing a small key. In the kitchen, he overheard the staff whispering about a delivery that had arrived before the guests. In the attic, he found a locked chest, its surface scratched as if recently opened. Each discovery added to the puzzle, but Poirot knew he was still missing the key piece. He returned to the drawing room, where the guests had gathered again, their tension palpable. "Monsieur Poirot," Lady Whitmore said, her voice strained. "Have you found anything?" Poirot smiled faintly. "I have found many things, Lady Whitmore, but the truth, it requires patience. Tell me, has anyone seen or heard anything unusual since last night?" Clara hesitated, then spoke. "I thought I heard footsteps outside my door last night, but when I looked, there was no one." Colonel Hargreaves frowned. "I heard them too, around 2 in the morning. I checked the hall. Empty. Dr. Baxter leaned forward. "I found a note under my door this morning. It said, 'Look closer.' Nothing else." Poirot's interest sharpened. "Show me this." Note: Dr. Baxter produced a crumpled slip of paper, the handwriting matching the invitation. Poirot studied it, then addressed the group. "Mies Amos, the mastermind is among us, or very close. These signs, footsteps, notes, hidden passages, they are designed to unsettle, to distract. But Hercule Poirot, he is not so easily distracted." Day passed with Poirot, questioning each guest further, probing their pasts. Lady Whitmore admitted to a rival in her social circle who had threatened her. Colonel Hargreaves revealed a comrade who blamed him for a failed mission. Clara spoke of a dismissed servant with a grudge. Dr. Baxter mentioned a stolen manuscript. Mrs. Pennington hinted at a fanatical reader who had stalked her. Victor Malone confessed to receiving threats after his expulsion. Sir Reginald remained vague, mentioning only business disputes. As evening fell, Poirot gathered the guests in the drawing-room once more. "Mesdames et messieurs, we are in a game of chess, and the mastermind is a grand master. But every grand master has a flaw, a moment of overconfidence. We must find it." Before anyone could respond, the gramophone hummed to life again. The voice returned, colder than before. "Poirot, you have played well, but the board is mine. The first trap is set. Find it before midnight, or one of you will pay the price." The message ended, and the room erupted in chaos. Poirot raised a hand, his voice cutting through the din. "Calm yourselves. We have until midnight. We will search the manor together. The mastermind underestimates us, and that will be their undoing." The guests, reluctant but spurred by fear, agreed. Poirot divided them into pairs, assigning each a section of the manor. He took Clara with him, sensing her fear might make her observant. They searched the east wing, finding nothing but dust and shadows, until Clara gasped, pointing to a clock on the wall. Its hands were frozen at 11:55. Poirot examined it, finding a wire running from its base into the wall. He traced it to a hidden compartment, revealing a small device with a blinking red light. "Mon Dieu," he whispered, "a bomb." The other guests, alerted by Clara's scream, rushed to the scene. Poirot's mind raced, analyzing the device. It was simple but deadly, with a timer set to detonate at midnight. He had minutes to act. "Stay back," he ordered, his hands steady as he examined the wires. His knowledge of such devices was limited, but his logic was unparalleled. He deduced the correct wire to cut a blue one, based on the pattern of the mechanism, and snipped it with a pair of scissors from Clara's sewing kit. The light went out, and the device fell silent. The guests exhaled, but Poirot's expression remained grim. This was but the first trap. The mastermind will not stop here. We must be ready. As the clock struck midnight, the manor was silent, but Poirot knew the game was far from over. The mastermind was watching, plotting, and Hercule Poirot would need all his wits to survive the night. Chapter 3. The mastermind's first move, the grand dining hall of Blackthorn Manor, was a spectacle of opulence. Its high ceilings adorned with chandeliers that glittered like constellations against the polished oak paneling. The long mahogany table, set for dinner, gleamed under the candlelight, each place setting meticulously arranged with silver cutlery and crystal goblets. Hercule Poirot sat at the head of the table, his posture impeccable, his moustache impeccably groomed, his sharp eyes scanning the assembled guests. The air was thick with tension, a palpable undercurrent beneath the polite clinking of glasses and murmured conversations. The cryptic invitation that had brought him here, penned in an elegant hand and laced with veiled threats, lingered in his mind like a discordant note in an otherwise harmonious symphony. The guests, a motley collection of strangers, were an intriguing puzzle in themselves. To Poirot's left sat Lady Evelyn Warrington, a widow of considerable wealth, her emerald necklace catching the light as she tilted her head in conversation. Her demeanour was poised, but her fingers toyed nervously with the stem of her wine. Glass, Across from her was Dr. Felix Harrow, a retired physician with a hawkish face and eyes that darted about as if cataloguing every detail of the room. Beside him, Miss Clara Beaumont, a young novelist with a penchant for dramatic gestures, spoke animatedly about her latest manuscript, though her laughter rang hollow. Then there was Mr. Reginald Voss, a stockbroker with a brash laugh and a habit of checking his pocket watch, and finally Captain Marcus Trent, a former military man whose stern expression and rigid posture suggested a life of discipline. Each guest, Poirot noted, carried an air of secrecy, their polite facades masking something deeper, something Poirot's keen mind was determined to uncover. The dinner had proceeded uneventfully until the dessert course, when a sudden hush fell over the room. The heavy double doors at the far end of the hall creaked open, and a figure appeared, not a servant, as one might expect, but a tall, cloaked silhouette, their face obscured by the shadow of a hood. The guests froze, their spoons hovering mid-air as the figure stepped forward, placing a small, ornate box at the center of the table. Without a word, the stranger turned and vanished back through the doors, which slammed shut with a resounding thud. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, rising from his chair. "What is this? A theatrical flourish?" His tone was light, but his mind was already racing, analyzing the implications of this unexpected intrusion. Lady Evelyn broke the silence, her voice trembling. What is that thing? Should we open it?" Dr. Harrow leaned forward, his scientific curiosity piqued. "It could be dangerous. We don't know who that was or what their intentions are." "Nonsense," Voss scoffed, though his bravado seemed forced. "It's probably just some parlor trick to spice up this dreary evening." Captain Trent's hand rested on the hilt of an imaginary sword, a habit from his military days. "I say we open it and find out. Hiding from it won't help." Miss Beaumont, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and fascination, whispered, "It's like something out of one of my novels. A mystery box, a shadowy figure. It's positively Gothic." Poirot raised a hand, silencing the chatter. "Mise Amos, let us proceed with caution. The one who placed this box wishes to provoke a reaction. We shall not give them the satisfaction of panic." He approached the table, his movements deliberate, and examined the box. It was crafted from ebony, inlaid with intricate silver filigree, and bore no visible lock or latch. A faint ticking sound emanated from within, barely audible but unmistakable to Poirot's trained ear. A clockwork mechanism. Perhaps, he mused aloud, his fingers tracing the edges of the box, or something more sinister. We must open it, but with care. The guests watched, breathless, as Poirot gently pressed the sides of the box. A soft click echoed in the silent room, and the lid sprang open, revealing a folded parchment and a small brass key. Poirot unfolded the parchment, his eyes scanning the text, written in the same elegant hand as the invitation that had brought him here. He read aloud, his voice steady but tinged with urgency. "To the esteemed Hercule Poirot and his fellow guests, welcome to my game. You have been chosen for your intellect, your secrets, and your sins. Tonight, the first move is mine. The key before you unlocks a door in this manor, behind which lies a challenge. Solve it, Monsieur Poirot, or one among you will not see the dawn. The clock is ticking. Choose wisely." A collective gasp rose from the table. Lady Evelyn clutched her necklace, her face pale. "This is madness. Who would do such a thing, Doctor?" Harrow's brow furrowed. A game. This sounds like the work of a deranged mind, or a brilliant one, Poirot said quietly, his gaze fixed on the key. The mastermind who wrote this knows us, knows our weaknesses. This is no idle prank. It is a test. Captain Trent stood, his chair scraping against the floor. Then let's find this door and be done with it. I'm not one to sit idly while some lunatic plays games. Poirot nodded, though his mind was already elsewhere, piecing together the puzzle. We, Captain, but we must proceed with order. The mastermind expects us to act rashly. We shall not oblige them. The guests followed Poirot as he led them from the dining hall, the brass key clutched in his hand. The manor's corridors were a labyrinth of shadowed alcoves and creaking floorboards, the flickering gas lamps casting eerie patterns on the walls. Poirot's eyes scanned every detail, the portraits of stern-faced ancestors, the faded tapestries, the locked doors that lined the halls. The key, he reasoned, must fit one of these doors, but which one, and what lay beyond? As they moved deeper into the manor, the air grew colder, the silence more oppressive. Miss Beaumont clung to Dr. Harrow's arm, her earlier bravado replaced. By unease, do you think someone is watching us? She whispered. Imagination is a powerful thing, Miss Beaumont, Poirot replied, though his own senses were on high alert. But we must focus on the task at hand. After several fruitless attempts, the key finally turned in the lock of a heavy oak door at the end of a narrow corridor. The door groaned as it swung open, revealing a small, dimly lit room. The walls were bare save for a single oil painting, a portrait of a man with piercing eyes and a cruel smile. At the center of the room stood a table, and on it, a peculiar device, a brass contraption with gears and levers, a small glass vial filled with a clear liquid, and a note pinned beneath a weight. Poirot approached the table, his eyes narrowing. As he read the note aloud, Monsieur Poirot, your mind is your weapon, but time is your enemy. This device will release its contents in 30 minutes. The liquid within is poison, and it will fill this room unless you disarm it. Solve the riddle, find the code, and live. Fail, and you shall breathe your last. The guests erupted in a chorus of protests and gasps. Poison, Lady Evelyn cried. This is monstrous. We must leave at once, Voss declared, turning toward the door only to find it locked behind them, the key no longer fitting the lock. Trapped. Captain Trent muttered, his hand clenching into a fist. The bastard planned this. Calm yourselves, Poirot said sharply, his voice cutting through the panic. Panic is the ally of our enemy. We have 30 minutes, and I, Hercule Poirot, do not intend to waste them. He examined the device closely, his fingers hovering over the gears. The mechanism was intricate, a maze of interlocking parts that suggested a combination lock of sorts. The note had mentioned a riddle, but no riddle was apparent lest it was hidden in plain sight. His eyes darted to the portrait on the wall, the man's cruel smile seeming to mock him. Mon ami, he murmured to himself, you think to outwit Poirot. We shall see. He turned to the guests, his expression calm but commanding. Each of you, search this room. Look for anything out of place, a mark, a symbol, a clue. The mastermind has left us a trail, and we shall follow it. The guests scattered, their fear giving way to purpose under Poirot's direction. Lady Evelyn examined the frame of the painting, her fingers tracing the edges for hidden compartments. Dr. Harrow knelt by the table, inspecting the device with a clinician's precision. Miss Beaumont ran her hands along the walls, searching for seams or panels. Voss and Trent checked the floorboards, tapping for hollow spaces. Poirot, meanwhile, focused on the note itself. The words were carefully chosen, the handwriting precise. He read it again, his lips moving silently. Your mind is your weapon, but time is your enemy. A simple statement, but Poirot knew better than to take it at face value. The mastermind was clever, their game layered with misdirection. The riddle, he suspected, was not in the words but in the room itself. Dr. Harrow, Poirot called, described the device to me. Every detail. The physician adjusted his glasses, his voice steady despite the circumstances. It's a mechanical timer connected to a vial of liquid. The gears are set to a specific sequence for dials, each with 10 positions, numbered 0 to 9. The vial is held in place by a spring-loaded mechanism. If the correct combination is entered, I presume the spring will release without breaking the vial. If not, he trailed off, his meaning clear. A 4-digit code, Poirot mused. And no obvious clue to guide us. C'est intéressant, lady. Evelyn called out from the painting. Monsieur Poirot, there's something here. The frame it has carvings, numbers etched into the wood. Poirot hurried to her side, his eyes scanning the frame. Sure enough, 4 numbers were carved into the corners, 7391. A code, perhaps, he said, but too obvious. The mastermind would not make it so simple. Miss Beaumont's voice trembled as she spoke. There's something else on the wall, behind the painting. It's faint, but it looks like writing. Poirot gently lifted the painting from its hook, revealing a series of cryptic symbols scratched into the plaster. They were not numbers or letters, but a sequence of shapes, circles, triangles, and squares, arranged in a grid. Magnifique, he whispered. The riddle begins to reveal itself. The symbols, he realized, were a cipher, a puzzle within a puzzle. Each shape likely corresponded to a number, but deciphering it would require logic and intuition. He turned to the guests, his voice calm but urgent. We have 25 minutes remaining. I need your assistance. Describe everything you see in this room, every detail, no matter how small. As the guests recounted their findings, a loose floorboard, a chipped tile, a faint scratch on the table, Poirot's mind worked furiously, piecing together the fragments. The symbols on the wall were the key, but their meaning was elusive. He closed his eyes, letting his little grey cells do their work. The shapes, they were not random. They formed a pattern, a sequence that repeated in a specific order. For shapes, for dials, for numbers. Eureka, he exclaimed, his eyes snapping open. The shapes are a substitution cipher. Each corresponds to a number based on its position in the sequence. The circle is first, the triangle second, the square third, and the blank space fourth. We must count their occurrences. He quickly sketched the grid on a piece of paper provided by Dr. Harrow, noting the frequency of each shape. After a moment's calculation, he arrived at a sequence 4, 8, 2, 6. This is our code, he declared, moving to the device. With steady hands, he turned the dials to the corresponding numbers. The guests holding their breath, a soft click echoed through the room, and the spring released, the vial remaining intact. The device stilled, its ticking silenced. The guests exhaled as one, relief washing over them. We did it, Miss Beaumont cried, her voice breaking with emotion. Not we, Poirot corrected gently. The mastermind has underestimated Hercule Poirot, but this is only the first move. There will be more. As the guests murmured their gratitude, gaze returned to the portrait. The man's cruel smile seemed to taunt him still, as if to say the game was far from over. The door to the room clicked open, released by some unseen mechanism, and the group stepped back into the corridor. There, nerves frayed but their resolve intact. Poirot lingered a moment, his eyes fixed on the note still clutched in his hand. The mastermind had revealed their hand, but only partially. This was a game of intellect, of cunning, and Poirot knew he was facing an adversary unlike any he had encountered before. "Mon cher ennemi," he murmured, "you have made your move. Now it is Poirot's turn." The night was far from over, and the manor held more secrets yet to be uncovered. As the group moved back toward the dining hall, Poirot's mind was already racing, anticipating the mastermind's next move. The game had begun, and Hercule Poirot was determined to emerge victorious. Chapter 4. The locked room riddled. A heavy oak door slammed shut behind Hercule Poirot with a resounding thud, the sound echoing through the dimly lit room like the tolling of a funeral bell. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and dust, and the faint metallic temps of something mechanical lingered, teasing his senses. His sharp eyes scanned the space, taking in every detail with the precision of a watchmaker. The room was small, no more than 12 feet square, its walls lined with faded crimson wallpaper peeling at the edges. A single chandelier hung from the ceiling, its candles unlit, casting no relief against the oppressive gloom. A sturdy mahogany desk stood in the center, its surface cluttered with an odd assortment of objects. A brass hourglass with sand already trickling, a tarnished silver key, a leather-bound journal, and a small wooden box intricately carved with geometric patterns. Above the desk, a large ornate clock ticked loudly, its hands pointing to 10 minutes to midnight. Poirot's moustache twitched as he absorbed the scene. The invitation to this secluded manor had promised a challenge, and now, locked in this room, he understood the game had begun in earnest. The cryptic note he'd received earlier that evening, slipped under his door in the dead of night, had warned of a test of intellect with a deadline. Solve the riddle before the clock strikes 12, or the consequences will be dire, it had read, the elegant handwriting betraying no hint of the sender's identity. The mastermind, whoever they were, had orchestrated this with care, and Poirot's mind was already racing, piecing together the puzzle before him. He approached the desk, his polished shoes clicking softly on the hardwood floor. The hourglass caught his eye first. Its sand flowed steadily, each grain a silent reminder of time slipping away. He estimated it held enough sand for perhaps 15 minutes less, if his instincts were correct. The clock on the wall, however, was the true arbiter of his fate. 10 minutes to midnight. 10 minutes to solve the riddle and escape, or face whatever consequences the mastermind had devised. Poirot's lips curled into a faint smile. He thrived on such challenges, his little grey cells already humming with anticipation. The silver key gleamed under the faint light filtering through a high, barred window. Poirot picked it up, turning it over in his gloved hands. It was heavy, its surface etched with a delicate pattern of interlocking circles. He tested it in the door's lock, but it didn't fit. Too small, too precise for the crude iron mechanism. He set it aside, his gaze shifting to the journal. Its leather cover was worn, the pages yellowed with age. He opened it carefully, expecting a cipher or a coded message, but found only blank pages save for the first, which bore a single sentence in the same elegant script as the note. The truth lies where the light does not. Poirot's brow furrowed. a riddle within a riddle. He glanced at the chandelier, its unlit candles mocking him. The room was too dark to read comfortably, the window's meager moonlight barely illuminating the desk. He ran his fingers along the journal's spine, checking for hidden compartments, but found none. The wooden box, however, piqued his interest. Its carvings were not merely decorative. They formed a grid, 9 squares by 9, each etched with a number from 1 to 9, repeated in a seemingly random pattern. A Sudoku puzzle, perhaps. No, too simple for a mind as devious as the Mastermind's. He pressed a square, and it sank slightly with a soft click. A mechanism. The box was locked, but its surface suggested it was part of the solution. The clock ticked louder, each second a hammer against his calm. 8 minutes to midnight. Poirot's mind raced through possibilities. The key, the journal, the box, the hourglass, all pieces of a larger puzzle. The Mastermind had designed this trap to test not only his intellect, but his ability to remain composed under pressure. He closed his eyes for a moment, centering himself. Order and method, he murmured, his mantra in moments of chaos. He would not be rushed into error. He returned to the journals. Cryptic message: the truth lies where the light does not. The chandelier was the obvious candidate, but its candles were unlit, and there was no means to light them, no matches. No flint. He stepped beneath it, craning his neck to inspect its intricate ironwork. Nothing unusual. He tapped the wall behind it, listening for hollow spaces, but the sound was solid. Frustration flickered, but he suppressed it. The Mastermind would not make it so easy. His attention shifted to the desk itself. He ran his hands along its edges, feeling for hidden drawers or panels. His fingers brushed a slight indentation beneath. The lip of the desk, barely noticeable. He pressed, and a small compartment sprang open, revealing a folded piece of parchment. His heart quickened as he unfolded it, revealing a diagram, a floor plan of the room, with an X marked in the corner, near the window. Below the diagram was another line of text: "Seek the shadow's heart." Poirot glanced at the window. The moonlight cast a faint shadow of the bars across the floor, forming a grid-like pattern. He knelt, tracing the shadow with his fingers. The heart of the shadow was where the bars intersected, forming a cross. He pressed the floorboard at that spot, and it gave slightly, revealing a hidden panel. Inside was a small brass dial, engraved with numbers from 1 to 9. A combination lock. The box's grid came to mind immediately. The numbers on its surface weren't random, they were the key to the dial. He retrieved the box, studying the grid. The numbers formed a pattern, but it wasn't immediately clear. He counted the occurrences of each number, 9 ones, 9 twos, and so forth. A magic square, perhaps. He recalled the ancient mathematical construct, where rows, columns, and diagonals summed to the same value. He scribbled calculations in the journal's blank pages, testing combinations. The sum of each row was 45, consistent with a 9 by 9 magic square, but the dial required a sequence, not a sum. The clock ticked on. 6 minutes to midnight. Poirot's pulse quickened, but his hands remained steady. He pressed the squares on the box in sequence, starting with the numbers 1 through 9 in order. Nothing. He tried the reverse. Still nothing. Then, inspiration struck. The journal's message: where the light does not. The shadow's heart was the key, but the sequence had to reflect the absence of light. He studied the shadow's grid on the floor again. The bars blocked certain squares, creating a pattern of light and dark. He mapped the darkened squares to the box's grid, pressing only those numbers. A soft click echoed through the room, and the box sprang open. Inside was a tiny brass cog, no larger than a coin, and a note. Turn the heart to free the mind. Poirot's eyes darted to the dial in the floor. He inserted the cog into a slot at its center, and it fit perfectly. He turned it, and the dial began to rotate, the numbers glowing faintly. He entered the sequence from the darkened squares. 3, 7, 2, 8, 1, 9, 4, 6, 5. The dial clicked, and a section of the wall slid open, revealing a narrow passageway. Poirot hesitated. The mastermind was cunning. This could be another trap. He examined the passageway's entrance, checking for tripwires or pressure plates. Finding none, he stepped inside, the wall ceiling shut behind him. The passage was pitch black, the air cold and damp. He moved cautiously, one hand trailing along the stone wall, his ears straining for any sound. The clock's ticking had faded, but the hourglass's sand still haunted his thoughts. Time was not his ally. The passage led to a second room, smaller than the first, with a single iron door and another desk. On it sat a typewriter, its keys gleaming in the dim light of a single bulb overhead. A sheet of paper was already loaded, with a typed message. One final riddle, Monsieur Poirot. Type the name of the mastermind, or this room becomes your tomb. You have 5 minutes. Poirot's mind raced. The mastermind's identity was still a mystery, but the clues were there. The guests at the manor, Lady Eleanor, the sharp-tongued aristocrat, Dr. Kessler, the reclusive chemist, Mr. Hargrove, the financier with a shady past, and Miss Vane, the enigmatic actress. Each had motives, but none had revealed enough to be certain. The journal, the box, the passage wall pointed to someone. With intimate knowledge of the manor, he recalled Lady Eleanor's familiarity with the estate's history, her casual mention of its secret passages. Too casual, perhaps. He sat at the typewriter, his fingers hovering over the keys. The clues suggested a mind obsessed with control without smarting him. The mastermind had to be someone who knew his methods, his reputation. Dr. Kessler, with his scientific precision, could devise such traps, but his demeanor was too detached, too academic. Hargrove's wealth could fund this elaborate scheme, but he lacked the imagination. Miss Vane, however, had the charisma and cunning to orchestrate a performance this grand. Her acting skills could mask her true intentions, and her vague backstory raised suspicions. The clock on the wall showed 3 minutes to midnight. Poirot typed Vane and pressed the return key. Nothing happened. He tried Eleanor, still nothing. His mind flashed to the journal's blank pages. Perhaps the clue wasn't in what was written, but in what was absent. The mastermind had left no trace, no signature, except the handwriting. He recalled the guest book at the manor's entrance, where each guest had signed in. Lady Eleanor's script matched the notes perfectly. He typed Lady Eleanor and hit return. The iron door clicked open, revealing the manor's main hall, where the other guests stood, their faces a mix of shock and relief. Lady Eleanor was among them, her expression unreadable. Poirot stepped out, his composure intact, but his mind already dissecting her motives. The mastermind had underestimated him, but the game was far from over. The sand in the hourglass had stopped, but the clock in his mind ticked on. Counting down to the final confrontation, he moved toward the guests, his eyes locked on Lady Eleanor. The trap had been sprung, but the true riddle, the why and the how, remained. His little grey cells buzzed with purpose. The mastermind had played their hand, but Hercule Poirot was not yet done. The hall was grand, its high ceilings adorned with frescoes of cherubs and vines, now faded with age. The guests huddled near a roaring fireplace, their whispers ceasing. As Poirot approached, Lady Eleanor stood apart, her posture regal, her eyes meeting his with a challenge. "You've escaped, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice smooth as velvet. "But the game is not over." Poirot inclined his head. "Nan, madame, it has only begun, and I, Hercule Poirot, shall see it to its end." The other guests shifted uneasily, their secrets hanging in the air like the dust motes caught in the firelight. Dr. Kessler adjusted his spectacles, his fingers trembling slightly. Hargrove's jaw tightened, his eyes darting to the exits. Miss Vane, ever the actress, maintained a mask of concern, but Poirot noted the faint tremor in her hands. The mastermind's trap had tested his intellect, but the true challenge lay in the human puzzle before him. He began to pace, his hands clasped behind his back, his mind sifting through the events of the evening. The invitation had arrived a week ago, delivered to his London flat by an anonymous courier. It had been written on heavy vellum, the words both an invitation and a taunt. "Monsieur Poirot, your reputation precedes you. Come to Blackwood Manor, where a mind equal to yours awaits. Decline, and others will suffer." The threat had been vague but unmistakable, and Poirot, ever unable to resist a challenge, had accepted. The manor itself was a labyrinth, its corridors winding and its rooms filled with relics of a bygone era. The guests had been an eclectic mix, each invited for reasons unclear. Lady Eleanor, the manor's owner, claimed to be hosting a charity gala, but no such event had materialized. Dr. Kessler, a chemist with a penchant for obscure poisons, had spoken little, his eyes always on the others. Hargrove, a financier rumoured to be embroiled in scandal, had been evasive about his reasons for attending, and Miss Vane, the actress, had charmed everyone while revealing nothing of substance. The first trap had been a warning chandelier, rigged to fall during dinner, narrowly missing Poirot. The note that followed had set the stage for this locked room, but it had also revealed the mastermind's arrogance. They believed they could outwit him, that their traps would break him. They were wrong. Poirot stopped pacing and faced the guests. "Miss Amos," he began, his voice calm but commanding, "the game we are playing is one of intellect, but also of motive. The mastermind is among us, and they have made a fatal error. They have underestimated Hercule Poirot." Lady Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Bold words, monsieur. But can you name this mastermind?" Poirot smiled faintly. "In time, madame. For now, I ask that you all remain here. The night is not yet over, and there are secrets yet to be uncovered." The guests exchanged glances, their unease palpable. Poirot's escape from the locked room had shaken them, but it had also heightened the stakes. The mastermind, whether Lady Eleanor or another, was watching, and Poirot knew the next move would be even more dangerous. He glanced at the clock in the hall. 1 minute past midnight. The deadline had passed, but the game was far from finished. He moved toward a side table, where a decanter of brandy sat untouched. Pouring himself a small glass, he used the moment to observe the guests' reactions. Hargrove's eyes followed him, calculating. Miss Vane's smile was too perfect, too practiced. Dr. Kessler's hands were still, but his breathing was uneven. Lady Eleanor, however, remained serene, her gaze never wavering. Poirot sipped the brandy, letting the warmth steady him. The locked room had been a test of logic, But the manor itself was the true puzzle. The hidden passage, the cryptic messages, the carefully placed clues all pointed to a mind that revelled in complexity. He recalled the manor's history, mentioned by Lady Eleanor during dinner. Blackwood Manor had been built by her ancestor, a mathematician obsessed with ciphers and traps. The passages, she had said, were designed to protect the family's secrets. But what secrets? And why target Poirot? His thoughts were interrupted by a faint sound, soft click, like the one from the box. It came from the fireplace. He approached, his senses alert. The flames cast dancing shadows on the hearth, but something was off. The logs were arranged precisely, their placement unnatural. He knelt, careful not to touch anything, and examined the hearthstone. A faint seam ran along its edge, barely visible. He pressed it, and a panel slid open, revealing a small metal box. Inside was another note, this one written in a hurried scrawl. "You are clever, Poirot, but not clever enough. The next trap will claim you unless you surrender." Beside the note was a vial of clear liquid, its label blank. Poirot's mustache twitched. Poison, perhaps, or another clue. He pocketed the vial, his mind racing. The mastermind was escalating, but they were also growing reckless. The hurried handwriting suggested pressure, perhaps fear. Poirot's escape had rattled them. He stood, addressing the guests once more. "The mastermind grows impatient," he said, holding up the note. "They wish for me to surrender, but Hercule Poirot does not surrender. We shall find them, and we shall end this game." The guests' reactions were telling. Hargrove's face paled, and he took a step back. Miss Vane's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Dr. Kessler stared at the vial in Poirot's hand, his eyes wide. Lady Eleanor, however, laughed softly. "You are a formidable opponent, monsieur," she said, "but this manor holds more secrets than you can imagine." Poirot nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "And I, madame, am a man who uncovers secrets. Let us see who prevails." The night stretched on, the manor's shadows deepening. Poirot knew the next trap would be more dangerous, perhaps lethal. But he also knew the mastermind had made a mistake. The vial, the note, the hidden passage all were breadcrumbs leading him closer to the truth. He would follow them, step by careful step, until the mastermind was unmasked. For now, he returned to the clues. The journal's blank pages nagged at him. He retrieved it from his pocket, flipping through it again. The single sentence, "The truth lies where the light does not," was a key. But he suspected it applied to more than the shadow's heart. He held a page up to the firelight, and faint impressions appeared, as if someone had written on a previous page and left traces. Invisible ink, perhaps. He needed heat, but the fireplace was too risky. He approached a candelabrum on the side table, lighting one of its candles with a match from his pocket. Holding the journal's pages near the flame, he watched as words materialized. Faint but legible, "The mastermind is one who knows you, Poirot. Look to your past." His heart sank. The mastermind wasn't just a stranger playing a game, they were someone from his past, someone with a grudge. He thought of old cases, old enemies, Moriarty, no, too theatrical. The Countess Vera Rossakoff. Possible, but her style was less mechanical, more passionate. He needed more information. The guests were growing restless, their whispers resuming. Poirot knew he couldn't keep them contained much longer. He needed to act, to force the mastermind's hand. He turned to Dr. Kessler. "Monsieur, you are a chemist. Tell me, what is in this vial?" Kessler hesitated, his eyes darting to Lady Eleanor. I would need to test it, he stammered. It could be anything. Poirot nodded, feigning satisfaction. Kessler's hesitation was a clue in itself. He moved to Miss Vane next. Mademoiselle, you are an actress. Have you ever performed in a play involving traps or ciphers? Her laugh was light, but her eyes were guarded. Many times, Monsieur Poirot. The stage is full of drama and deception. He smiled thinly. Indeed, and you play your part well. Finally, he faced Lady Eleanor. Madame, you know this manor better than anyone. Tell me, where does the next trap lie? Her smile was enigmatic. You're closer than you think, monsieur. But beware, some traps are not what they seem. Poirot's mind raced. The vial, the invisible ink, the passage all pointed to Lady Eleanor, but he needed proof. He decided to test her. Perhaps, Madame, you would accompany me to the library. There may be records of this manor's secrets. Her eyes flickered, but she nodded. Of course, monsieur. Lead the way. As they moved through the manor's corridors, Poirot's senses were on high alert. The library was on the second floor, its shelves filled with ancient tomes and dusty ledgers. If the manor held records of its traps, they would be there, but he also knew Lady Eleanor was no ordinary suspect. If she was the mastermind, this was her domain, and every step could be a trap. The library was vast, its air heavy with the scent of leather and mildew. Poirot scanned the shelves, his fingers trailing over spines. Lady Eleanor watched him, her presence both reassuring and unsettling. The manor's records are in the east wing, she said, gesturing to a doorway, but they are incomplete. Poirot nodded, his mind elsewhere. The invisible ink had mentioned his past. He thought of a case from years ago, a smuggling ring he'd dismantled in Brussels. Lady Eleanor's late husband had been tangentially involved, a minor player whose name had surfaced briefly. Could she blame Poirot for his death? The pieces were falling into place, but he needed more. He found a ledger marked Blackwood Estate, 1890 to 1900. Flipping through it, he saw references to the manor's construction, including detailed plans for secret passages and mechanical traps. One entry caught his eye, commissioned by Lord Blackwood for the protection of the family's legacy. Designed by E. Blackwood. Lady Eleanor's maiden name was Blackwood. He turned to her, his voice steady. Madame, your family built these traps, and you, I suspect, have used them to challenge me. Why? Her smile faded. You are clever, Poirot, but you're wrong about one thing. This isn't about revenge. It's about proving I'm better. Before he could respond, the floor beneath him shifted. A trapdoor opened, and Poirot fell, landing hard in a dark chamber below. The air was colder here, the walls damp stone. A single bulb flickered, illuminating a new puzzle, a series of levers, each marked with a symbol: circle, triangle, square, star. Above them, a plaque read, "Choose wisely, or the manor claims you." Poirot's heart raced, but his mind remained sharp. The symbols matched those on the key from the locked room. He studied them, recalling the grid on the box. The levers had to be pulled in a specific order, but which? He traced the symbols in his mind, mapping them to the darkened squares. Circle, star, triangle, square. He pulled the levers in sequence. A low rumble filled the chamber, and the wall parted, revealing a staircase leading up. Poirot climbed, emerging in the manor's main hall once more. The guests were gone, scattered, but Lady Eleanor stood alone, her eyes blazing. "You've done well, Poirot," she said, "but the final trap awaits. Solve it, or we all perish." Poirot's smile was grim. "Then let us end this, madame." The manor seemed to hold its breath as he followed her, the final confrontation looming. The mastermind had revealed herself, but the game was not yet won. His little grey cells worked furiously, piecing together the last clues. The vial, the traps, the invisible ink all pointed to a mind both brilliant and unhinged. Lady Eleanor was the mastermind, but her motive was still unclear. Pride, madness, or something deeper. As they entered the manor's great hall, Poirot saw the final puzzle. A massive clock, its face covered in symbols, its hands frozen at 5 minutes to midnight. A note was pinned to it: "Set the time to the hour of truth, or the manor burns." Poirot's mind raced. The hour of truth. The journal, the shadows, the levers all pointed to the absence of something. He studied the clock's symbols, recognizing them as astrological signs. The darkened squares from the box formed a constellation Orion, the hunter. The hour of truth was the hour Orion was visible in the sky. He calculated quickly, recalling the manor's location. Midnight, precisely. He set the clock's hands to 12. The mechanism whirred, and the clock's face opened, revealing a control panel. Inside was a single button, glowing red. Poirot hesitated, then pressed it. The manor shuddered, but instead of fire, the lights blazed on, and hidden doors opened, revealing the other guests, safe and unharmed. Lady Eleanor's face fell. "You've won, Poirot," she whispered. He shook his head. "Nan, madame, it is not I who have won. It is reason, order, and method." The authorities arrived soon after, summoned by a mechanism Poirot had triggered. Lady Eleanor was taken into custody, her motives revealed as a twisted desire to outwit the great detective, to prove her intellect superior. The manor's traps, built by her ancestor, had been her tools. Her obsession with puzzles her undoing. Poirot watched as she was led away, his expression unreadable. The game was over, but the weight of it lingered. He had escaped the locked room, unraveled the riddles, and unmasked the mastermind. But the cost of such victories was never light. As he stepped into the night, the manor's shadow loomed behind him, a reminder of the darkness he faced with every case. But Hercule Poirot was not one to dwell. There would be other challenges, other masterminds, and he would meet them, as always, with his little grey cells and an unyielding resolve. Chapter 5. Clues in the shadows. The heavy oak door of the locked room swung open with a groan, its hinges protesting as Hercule Poirot stepped into the dimly lit corridor beyond. His heart still raced from the timed puzzle that had nearly cost him his life, but his mind was already turning, sharp and relentless, toward the next challenge. The manor, with its sprawling halls and oppressive silence, seemed to pulse with secrets, as though the very walls were complicit in the mastermind's game. Poirot adjusted his impeccable moustache, his green eyes glinting with determination. The escape had been a triumph of intellect, but it was merely the opening gambit in a far larger contest. Somewhere in this labyrinthine estate, clues awaited that would lead him closer to unmasking the mastermind. The corridor stretched before him, lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors whose painted eyes seemed to follow his every step. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood and dust, and the faint flicker of gas lamps cast long, wavering shadows across the walls. Poirot's polished shoes clicked softly against the polished floorboards as he moved, his senses attuned to the slightest anomaly. He had no doubt that the mastermind, whoever they were, had designed this manor as a chessboard, with every room, every object, a potential move in their deadly game. His first instinct was to return to the main hall, where the other guests, those enigmatic strangers who had been summoned to this secluded manor, waited. Each of them, he knew, was a piece in the puzzle, their motives and secrets interwoven with the mastermind's plan. But something urged him to pause, to linger in the quiet of the corridor. The locked room had been a test, yes, but it had also been a distraction. The mastermind would not have left the solution so straightforward. There must be something here, in the shadows, that would point him toward the truth. Poirot's gaze fell upon a small, ornate table tucked against the wall. It held a single object, a brass candelabrum, its 3 candles unlit, their wicks pristine. He approached, his fingers brushing the cool metal. The candelabrum was heavier than it looked, and as he lifted it, he noticed a faint scratch on the table's surface, a series of irregular marks that formed a crude arrow pointing toward the wall. His lips curved into a slight smile. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "the mastermind plays a clever game, but Hercule Poirot is not so easily outwitted." He ran his fingers along the wall, feeling for any irregularity. The wallpaper, a faded pattern of roses and vines, gave way slightly under his touch, revealing a seam that was nearly invisible to the untrained eye. With a gentle press, a panel clicked and slid aside, revealing a narrow recess. Inside lay a small, leather-bound notebook, its edges worn but its pages intact. Poirot's heart quickened. This was no accident. The mastermind had intended for him to find this, or perhaps had underestimated his ability to do so. He opened the notebook, his eyes scanning the pages. The handwriting was meticulous, almost mechanical, with no flourish or personality to betray its author. It contained a series of cryptic entries, each dated and written in a code that was both familiar and infuriatingly elusive. Numbers, letters, and symbols danced across the pages, interspersed with occasional phrases in French, Latin, and English. One entry caught his eye. "The hunter seeks the shadow, but the shadow seeks the light. In the heart of the manor, the truth lies buried." Below it was a sequence of numbers, 3712. Poirot closed the notebook and slipped it into his pocket. The message was clear. The manor held more secrets, and this code was a key to unlocking them. But where to begin? The numbers could refer to anything: pages, rooms, steps, or even a combination to some hidden mechanism. And the phrase about the shadow and the light suggested a duality, a balance that the mastermind seemed to revel in. Poirot's mind raced, piecing together possibilities. The heart of the manor could be a literal location, perhaps the central room, or a metaphorical one, tied to the mastermind's motives. He continued down the corridor, his steps deliberate but cautious. The gas lamps flickered as he passed, casting fleeting shapes that seemed to writhe in the corners of his vision. He reached a junction where the corridor split into 3 paths, one leading toward the main hall, another descending to the lower floors, and a third, narrower passage that seemed to lead to a less frequented wing of the manor. His instinct told him to avoid the obvious route. The main hall was where the guests were, and thus where the mastermind would expect him to go. Instead, he chose the narrow passage, its walls lined with faded tapestries depicting scenes of medieval hunts. The passage ended at a heavy iron door, its surface etched with intricate designs of vines and thorns. A lock, old but sturdy, barred his way. Poirot examined it closely, noting the 3 dials on its surface, each marked with numbers from 0 to 9. The code from the notebook the 7th of March 12 came to mind, but there was a problem. The number 12 could not fit on a single dial. He frowned, his mind working through the possibilities. Perhaps the code was not for a lock at all, or perhaps it required interpretation. He tried entering 371, then 372, but the lock remained, stubbornly closed. Frustrated but undeterred, Poirot stepped back and examined the door itself. The etchings of vines and thorns seemed to form a pattern, one that was not merely decorative. He traced the lines with his finger, following their curves until he noticed a small, raised section in the shape of a rose. Pressing it, he heard a faint click, and a hidden panel in the door slid open, revealing a keyhole. The notebook had not mentioned a key, but Poirot's keen eyes scanned the surrounding area. On the floor, partially hidden by the edge of a tapestry, was a small brass key, its head shaped like a rose. He inserted the key and turned it, and the iron door creaked open, revealing a small, dimly lit room. The air inside was stale, heavy with the scent of old paper and leather. Shelves lined the walls, filled with books and manuscripts, many of them ancient and crumbling. A single table stood in the center, holding a wooden box with a carved lid. Poirot approached, his curiosity piqued. The box was unlocked, and inside he found a collection of letters, each sealed with a wax emblem bearing the same rose design as the key. He opened the first letter, its paper yellowed with age. It was addressed to the Keeper of Shadows, and spoke of a pact, a vow to protect a secret that could unmake the world. The language was grandiose, almost theatrical, but it hinted at a conspiracy that stretched back decades, perhaps centuries. The other letters were similar, each written by a different hand but signed with cryptic initials, AR, LV, MT. Poirot's mind raced. Were these the Mastermind's predecessors or allies? And why had they been hidden here, in a room that seemed forgotten by time? As he read, a faint sound reached his ears, soft, rhythmic tapping from somewhere within the walls. He froze, his senses sharpening. The tapping grew louder, more insistent, and then stopped abruptly. Poirot's hand went to the notebook in his pocket, his mind racing. The Mastermind was watching, perhaps even now, and this room was no sanctuary. He replaced the letters in the box and closed it, then turned to the shelves, scanning for anything else that might hold a clue. One book caught his eye, its spine embossed with the number 37, the code from the notebook. The 7th of March, 12 flashed in his mind. He pulled the book from the shelf, and as he did, a section of the wall behind it slid open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Poirot hesitated. The Mastermind's traps were growing more elaborate, and this could easily be another, but he could not turn back. The truth lay ahead, and he would not be deterred. With a deep breath, he descended the staircase, the air growing colder with each step. The walls were rough stone, damp to the touch, and the faint glow of his pocket torch barely pierced the gloom. At the bottom, he found himself in a small chamber, its walls covered in intricate carvings, scenes of chess games, with knights and kings locked in eternal struggle. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and on it a single object, a chess piece, a black king, carved from obsidian. Poirot picked it up, turning it over in his hands. It was heavier than it should have been, and as he examined it, he noticed a faint seam along its base. With a gentle twist, the king opened, revealing a tiny scroll inside. Unrolling it, he found a single sentence. The shadow moves before the light, but the light will always follow. Below, it was another code, 1237. The reversal of the earlier code was no coincidence. The mastermind was toying with him, leaving breadcrumbs that led in circles. But Poirot was not discouraged. The chess piece, the scroll, the letters all, were pieces of a larger puzzle, one that he was determined to solve. He pocketed the scroll and the king, then retraced his steps, emerging back into the room with the iron door. As he stepped into the corridor, he heard voices faint but growing, closer. The other guests, perhaps, or the mastermind's agents. He moved quickly, slipping into the shadows of a nearby alcove. Two figures passed by, their conversation hushed but urgent. "He's closer than we thought," one said, a woman's voice, sharp with anxiety. "If he finds the heart, it's over." The other, a man, replied, "Then we make sure he doesn't. The next trap is ready." Poirot's heart pounded, but his mind remained clear. The heart, again another reference to the manor's core, or perhaps to the mastermind's ultimate goal. He waited until the voices faded, then emerged, his resolve hardened. The clues he had found, the notebook, the letters, the chess piece were leading him somewhere, but he needed more. The manor was vast, and time was not on his side. He made his way to the library, a grand room filled with towering bookshelves and a massive fireplace. The guests had mentioned it as a gathering place, but it was empty now, its silence almost oppressive. Poirot's eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail. The polished mahogany table, the crystal chandelier, the heavy curtains that blocked out the moonlight. Something about the fireplace caught his attention, a faint draft, barely noticeable, but out of place in a room so still. He approached, running his fingers along the mantel. A small carving, almost hidden among the ornate designs, depicted a rose, identical to the one on the key. He pressed it, and with a low rumble, the fireplace slid aside, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a map of the manor, its rooms and passages marked with precision. Certain areas were circled in red, labeled with numbers 3, 7, 12. Poirot's pulse quickened. The map was a breakthrough, a guide to the mastermind's design. The circled rooms were likely key locations, perhaps hiding more clues, or even the heart itself. He memorized the map, then folded it and tucked it into his pocket. The mastermind had underestimated him, leaving these clues in the belief that no one could connect them. But Hercule Poirot was no ordinary man as he stepped back into the library. A sudden noise startled him, a crash from upstairs, followed by a scream. The other guests, he realized, were in danger. Or perhaps it was another of the mastermind's ploys, designed to draw him out. Either way, he could not ignore it. He moved swiftly, his mind racing through the clues he had gathered. The notebook, the letters, the chess piece, the map. They were all connected, and the answer lay in the heart of the manor. The scream came again, sharper this time, and Poirot broke into a run, his polished shoes echoing through the halls. The mastermind's game was escalating, and he would need all his wits to survive the next move. The shadows held their secrets, but Hercule Poirot would bring them to light. Chapter 6. The Betrayal of Trust. Hercule Poirot stood in the dimly lit library of Blackthorn Manor, his small, precise hands clasped behind his back, his moustache twitching slightly as he surveyed the room. The air was heavy with the scent of old books and wax polish, but beneath it lingered something else, a faint, metallic temps that set his nerves on edge. The events of the past hours weighed heavily on him. The cryptic invitation, the gathering of enigmatic guests, the chilling message from the unseen mastermind, and his narrow escape from the locked room riddle. Yet it was the discovery of clues, hidden in the manor's shadows, that had brought him here, to this moment where the game was about to take a darker turn. The library was vast, its towering shelves crammed with leather-bound tomes, their spines gleaming faintly in the flickering light of a single chandelier. The other guests had retired to their rooms after the evening's unsettling events, but Poirot, ever restless when a puzzle remained unsolved, had slipped away to investigate further. The clues he had uncovered, a scrap of paper with a coded message, a monogrammed handkerchief, and a curiously placed book on cryptography, pointed to this room as the heart of the mystery. But something else gnawed at him, a suspicion that had taken root during the evening's conversations. One of the guests, someone he had begun to trust, was not what they seemed. He moved silently across the Persian rug, his polished shoes making no sound, and paused before a mahogany desk cluttered with papers and a single, unlit candelabrum. His eyes scanned the surface, noting the faint scratches on the wood, as if something heavy had been dragged across it recently. He knelt, his fingers brushing the edge of the desk, and found a small, concealed drawer. With a gentle tug, it slid open, revealing a folded letter sealed with red wax. The seal bore a singular coiled serpent, its fangs bared. Poirot's heart quickened. This was no ordinary correspondence. He broke the seal and unfolded the letter, his eyes narrowing as he read the words scrawled in elegant, looping script. Monsieur Poirot, you are a man of remarkable intellect, but even you cannot see all ends. Trust is a fragile thing, is it not? Look to those closest to you, for one among them carries my mark. The game continues, and your next move will cost you dearly. The serpent Poirot's lips tightened. The mastermind, this serpent, was playing a psychological game, sowing doubt and fear. But who among the guests could be the traitor? He had spent the evening observing them all. Lady Evelyn Hawthorne, the sharp-witted aristocrat with a penchant for cryptic remarks. Dr. Felix Reinhardt, the German physician whose calm demeanor seemed almost too perfect. Miss Clara Beaumont, the young heiress whose nervous glances betrayed a hidden fear. And Captain James Harrow, the retired military man whose brusque manner concealed a keen mind. Then there was Madame Isabelle Dubois, the French novelist whose charm and quick laughter had won Poirot's grudging respect. Could one of them be the mastermind's pawn? He slipped the letter into his pocket and straightened, his mind racing. The clues pointed to a betrayal, but he needed more, something tangible to unmask the traitor. As he turned to leave, a soft creak broke the silence. His head snapped toward the sound, his eyes locking onto the far corner of the library where a shadow shifted. Someone was there. Who is it? Poirot called, his voice steady but laced with authority. Show yourself, if you please. A figure stepped into the light, and Poirot's breath caught. It was Madame Dubois, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders, her eyes wide with what appeared to be concern. She wore a silk dressing gown, its emerald hue catching the chandelier's glow. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice soft but urgent. I could not sleep. I saw a light in the library and thought, perhaps you had found something. Poirot studied her, his green eyes piercing. And what, madame, would bring you to the library at such an hour, if not to seek something yourself? She hesitated, her fingers twisting the edge of her gown. I wished to help. This place, this game, it frightens me. You are the only one I trust to find the truth." The words were warm, sincere, yet Poirot's instincts prickled. Trust is a fragile thing, the letter had warned. He smiled, his moustache curving upward, but his eyes remained cold. "Your concern is most touching, madame. But tell me, why do you trust me? We are, after all, strangers in this strange game." Her laugh was light, almost musical. "Oh, Monsieur Poirot, your reputation precedes you. Who else but the great Hercule Poirot could unravel this madness?" He inclined his head, accepting the compliment but not its sincerity. "Then perhaps you will assist me now. I have found a letter, one that suggests a betrayal among us. Have you seen anything, heard anything that might point to the culprit?" Madame Dubois's eyes flickered, and for a moment Poirot thought he saw a shadow of calculation in her gaze. But she shook her head, her expression earnest. "Nothing, monsieur, but I will keep my eyes open. We must be vigilant. Yes, indeed." Poirot murmured, his mind already piecing together the puzzle. "We must." As she bid him good night and glided toward the door, Poirot's thoughts churned. Madame Dubois had been quick to align herself with him, quick to offer help. Too quick, perhaps. He recalled her earlier behavior, the way she had deflected questions about her past, the subtle glances she exchanged with Captain Harrow during dinner. There was a connection there, one he had not yet fully grasped. He returned to his room, the letter burning in his pocket, and sat at the small writing desk. The manor was silent now, save for the distant creak of floorboards and the faint howl of the wind outside. He spread the letter before him, rereading the words, searching for hidden meaning. The serpent symbol intrigued him. It was not a common motif, yet it felt familiar, as if he had seen it before. He closed his eyes, summoning the mental catalogue of his little grey cells. And an image surfaced, a book in the library, its cover embossed with a similar serpent. He made a mental note to examine it further. The next morning, the guests gathered in the dining room, their faces pale and drawn. The events of the previous night, the mastermind's message, the locked room, trap had left them shaken. Poirot observed them closely as they sipped their coffee and picked at their breakfast. Lady Evelyn sat at the head of the table, her posture regal but her eyes darting nervously. Dr. Reinhardt was quiet, his fingers drumming a slow rhythm on the tablecloth. Miss Beaumont clutched her teacup, her knuckles white, while Captain Harrow barked orders at the flustered footman. Madame Dubois, however, was composed, her smile radiant as she engaged Lady Evelyn in light conversation. Poirot cleared his throat, drawing their attention. "Mies, Amos," he began, his voice calm but commanding. "Last night I made a discovery. A letter hidden in the library that speaks of a betrayal among us. One of you, it seems, is not what you claim to be." A gasp rippled through the room. Miss Beaumont's teacup clattered to its saucer, and Captain Harrow's face reddened. "What's that supposed to mean, Poirot?" he demanded. "Are you accusing one of us?" "I accuse no one yet," Poirot replied, his eyes scanning their faces. "But I warn you all, the mastermind, this serpent, has a confederate in this house, and I, Hercule Poirot, will uncover them." The room erupted into murmurs, accusations flying like sparks. Lady Evelyn declared it outrageous, while Dr. Reinhardt called for calm. Madame Dubois, however, remained silent, her eyes fixed on Poirot with an intensity that sent a chill down his spine. As the day progressed, Poirot set about his investigation with renewed vigor. He interviewed each guest, probing their stories, testing their alibis. Lady Evelyn spoke of her family's long history with the manor, but her knowledge of its secrets seemed suspiciously vague. Dr. Reinhardt admitted to a past in military intelligence, a detail that raised Poirot's eyebrows. Miss Beaumont's nervous demeanor suggested she was hiding something, though her story of inheriting a fortune held up under scrutiny. Captain Harrow was evasive about his recent travels, muttering about personal matters, and Madame Dubois. Her answers were smooth, polished, but they lacked depth, as if she were reciting a script by afternoon. Poirot's suspicions had crystallized around two figures, Captain Harrow and Madame Dubois. The captain's brusque manner and vague answers suggested he was hiding something significant, while Madame Dubois's charm felt increasingly like a mask. He needed evidence, something to tip the scales. He returned to the library, his eyes drawn to the book he had recalled the previous night. It was a slim volume on heraldry, its cover embossed with a coiled serpent. He opened it, flipping through the pages until he found a folded note tucked shut. The note was written in the same elegant script as the letter from the drawer. "You are close, Monsieur Poirot, but not close enough. The serpent strikes from within. Check the captain's luggage." Poirot's pulse quickened. The note pointed directly to Captain Harrow. He replaced the book and made his way to the guest quarters, his mind racing. The captain's room was locked, but Poirot, ever resourceful, had procured a skeleton key from the manor's staff. He slipped inside, his eyes scanning the room. The luggage was neatly stacked in a corner, and he opened the largest case, rifling through its contents. There, beneath a pile of clothes, he found it, a small, locked box with the serpent symbol etched on its lid. Using a hairpin from Miss Beaumont, Poirot picked the lock and opened the box. Inside was a collection of documents, letters, maps, and a list of names, including his own. The letters were correspondence between the captain and an unknown figure, discussing plans to neutralize Poirot and secure a mysterious artifact hidden in the manor. The evidence was damning. Captain Harrow was the mastermind's confederate. Poirot's heart sank. He had liked the captain, respected his blunt honesty and military precision. The betrayal stung, not because of personal attachment, but because it was a reminder that even the sharpest mind could be deceived by a clever facade. He pocketed the documents and returned to his room, his mind already planning his next move. That evening, Poirot gathered the guests in the drawing room, his demeanor calm but resolute. "Mes amis," he said, his voice cutting through the tension, "I have uncovered the traitor among us. Captain Harrow, you have been in league with the Mastermind, plotting against us all." The captain's face paled, but he recovered quickly, his voice booming. "This is absurd. You have no proof." Poirot produced the documents, laying them out on the table. "These, Captain, tell a different story. Letters, plans, and a symbol that marks you as the serpent's ally." The room exploded into chaos. Lady Evelyn gasped, Miss Beaumont burst into tears, and Dr. Reinhardt demanded explanations. Madame Dubois, however, remained silent, her eyes locked on Poirot. For a moment, he thought he saw a flicker of relief in her gaze, as if she had feared being the one exposed. Captain Harrow lunged for the door, but Poirot had anticipated this. He had alerted the manor staff, and two burly footmen blocked the exit, restraining the captain as he shouted denials. Poirot watched, his expression unreadable, as the captain was led away to await the authorities. But even as the guests breathed sighs of relief, Poirot's mind was not at ease. The documents had been too easy to find, the note in the book too conveniently placed. The mastermind was clever, and this felt like a move in their gamer sacrifice of a pawn to protect the king. And Madame Dubois's silence, her subtle glances, lingered in his thoughts. Was the captain the true traitor, or had he been set up to distract from the real threat? Poirot retired to his room, the weight of the betrayal heavy on his shoulders. The game was far from over, and the mastermind was still out there, watching, waiting for his next move. He would need to be more vigilant than ever, for trust, as the serpent had warned, was indeed a fragile thing. Chapter 7. A Game of Motives. The heavy oak door of the manor's drawing-room creaked shut behind Hercule Poirot as he surveyed the assembled guests. The air was thick with tension, the kind that settles like fog in a room where secrets are currency and trust is a rare commodity. The chandelier above cast a pale, flickering light, its crystals catching the shadows of the ornate furniture and the nervous glances exchanged among the group. Poirot's sharp eyes darted from face to face, noting the subtle tells the twitch of a lip, the fidgeting hands, the averted gazes that betrayed the unease beneath their polished exteriors. This was no ordinary gathering. It was a battlefield of wits, and Poirot was determined to emerge victorious. The mastermind's chilling message from the previous night still echoed in his mind. A game had been set, a deadly puzzle designed to test the limits of his intellect. The locked room riddle had been merely the opening gambit, a test he had passed with his usual finesse. But the stakes were rising, and Poirot knew the next move required him to unravel the tangled web of motives that bound these strangers together. Each guest, he suspected, held a piece of the puzzle, and it was his task to extract the truth from their carefully constructed facades. He stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking softly on the parquet floor, and cleared his throat. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to the diminutive detective with the immaculate moustache. "Madame et messieurs," he began, his voice calm but carrying the weight of authority. "We find ourselves in a most peculiar situation. A game, as our unseen host has called it, is afoot. But this is no mere parlour. Game it is a matter of life and death. And so, I, Hercule Poirot, propose to play this game with the only weapon that matters, the truth." A murmur rippled through the group, some shifting uncomfortably in their seats, others exchanging wary glances. Poirot's gaze settled on the first of the guests, Lady Beatrice Harrow, a statuesque woman in her late 40s, whose emerald gown seemed to shimmer with her own self-assurance. Her sharp blue eyes met his without flinching, but there was a tightness in her jaw that suggested she was not as composed as she wished to appear. "Lady Harrow," Poirot said, his tone measured, "perhaps you will begin. You arrived at this manor under the pretense of a social invitation, yet I observe that you carry with you a certain unease. Tell me, what is it that brings you here, truly?" Lady Harrow's lips parted in a faint smile, though it did not reach her eyes. "Monsieur Poirot, you are as perceptive as your reputation suggests. I came here at the invitation of our mysterious host, as did we all. I assumed it was a matter of business. My late husband's investments, perhaps he had many dealings, not all of them transparent." Poirot tilted his head, his moustache twitching slightly. "And yet, you brought with you a letter, tucked into your reticule, which you have glanced at several times this evening. A letter, I suspect, that contains more than mere pleasantries. Would you care to share its contents?" Her hand instinctively moved to the small silk bag at her side, and a flush crept up her neck. You are mistaken, Monsieur Poirot. It is merely a personal correspondence, nothing more. Personal, perhaps, Poirot said, his voice soft but unrelenting, but significant, none. In a game such as this, every detail matters. I urge you to reconsider your reticence. Lady Harrow's composure wavered, but she shook her head. I have nothing to hide, but I will not be interrogated like a common criminal. Poirot nodded, as if conceding the point, but his eyes gleamed with quiet determination. He turned to the next guest, Mr. Victor Langston, a wiry man with a nervous energy that seemed to pulse through his thin frame. His fingers drummed a staccato rhythm on the arm of his chair, and his eyes darted toward the door as if expecting an escape route to materialize. Mr. Langston, Poirot said, stepping closer, you are a man of science, are you not? A chemist, I believe, with a particular interest in rare compounds. Yet you seem ill at ease in this company. What is it that troubles you? Langston's fingers stilled, and he forced a laugh that sounded more like a cough. Troubles me? Nothing, Monsieur Poirot. I'm simply unused to such gatherings. I prefer my laboratory to social intrigues. And yet, Poirot countered, your laboratory, it is not so far from here, is it? A mere hour's journey, I understand. Curious, then, that you would accept an invitation to a place so far from your usual pursuits. Unless, of course, there is something or someone here that draws you. Langston's face paled, and he adjusted his spectacles with trembling fingers. I received an invitation, like the others. It promised answers, about a matter from my past. That's all I'll say. Poirot's eyebrows rose slightly. Answers, you say? And what question, I wonder, is so pressing that it brings a man of science into a den of mystery? Langston's mouth opened, then closed, and he sank back into his chair, silent. Poirot did not press further, but his mind was already cataloguing the man's reaction, filing it away alongside the other fragments of truth he was collecting. One by one, Poirot moved through the room, his questions sharp and precise, each designed to peel back a layer of deception. There was Miss Clara Duval, a young French actress whose charm was as practiced as her accent, but whose eyes betrayed a flicker of fear when Poirot mentioned the name of a certain Parisian financier. Then there was Dr. Elias Morton, a retired physician whose calm demeanor cracked when Poirot noted the faint ink stains on his fingers, suggesting he had been writing something in haste, perhaps a confession. And finally, Mr. Reginald Crane, a jovial businessman whose hearty laugh rang hollow when Poirot inquired about his recent financial troubles. With each exchange, Poirot wove a tapestry of motives, each thread a potential clue to the mastermind's identity. He observed the way Lady Harrow's gaze lingered on Langston, the way Miss Duval's fingers tightened around her wineglass when Dr. Morton spoke, the way Crane's joviality faltered when Poirot mentioned debts. There were connections here, invisible but palpable, and Poirot's little grey cells were working tirelessly to map them. As the interrogations continued, the atmosphere in the room grew heavier, the guests' facades crumbling under the weight of Poirot's scrutiny. He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, his voice a steady cadence that seemed to lull them into revealing more than they intended. You see, he said at one point, addressing the group as a whole, the truth, it is like a mosaic. Each of you holds a piece, and it is only by assembling these pieces that we may see the whole picture. But beware, conceal your piece, and you risk becoming a pawn in the mastermind's game. A sudden crash interrupted his words. A glass had fallen from Miss Duval's hand, shattering on the floor. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with something akin to panic. I didn't mean to, she stammered, But Poirot's attention was already on her, his gaze piercing. "An accident, mademoiselle?" he asked softly, "or perhaps a reaction to something I have said?" She shook her head, her curls bouncing with the motion. "It's nothing. I'm just tired. This place, this game, it's too much." Poirot nodded, but his mind was racing. The actress was hiding something, and he suspected it was more than nerves. He made a mental note to revisit her later, when the others were not watching so closely. As the evening wore on, Poirot's interrogations grew more pointed, his questions probing deeper into the guests' pasts. He spoke of old scandals, forgotten debts, and whispered rumors, watching their reactions with the precision of a surgeon. Lady Harrow's composure began to fray when he mentioned a certain estate sale that had occurred after her husband's death. Langston's nervous tics intensified when Poirot alluded to a failed experiment that had cost a colleague dearly. Dr. Morton's calm facade cracked when Poirot asked about a patient who had died under mysterious circumstances, and Crane's joviality vanished entirely when Poirot mentioned a business deal gone sour, one that had left a trail of enemies in its wake. By the time Poirot paused to take a sip of water, the room was a cauldron of tension. The guests were no longer merely uneasy, they were on edge, their secrets teetering on the brink of exposure. Poirot set down his glass and smiled faintly, a gesture that did little to ease the atmosphere. "Now," he said, his voice cutting through the silence, "we come to the heart of the matter. Each of you has a motive, a reason to be here, a connection to this game. But one of you, perhaps more than one, has a deeper connection, to the mastermind." A collective gasp rippled through the room, followed by a chorus of denials. Lady Harrow's voice was sharp, Langston's stammering, Miss Duval's tearful, Dr. Morton's measured, and Crane's indignant. But Poirot raised a hand, silencing them. "Do not protest, Mies Amos. The truth, it will reveal itself in time. But for now, I ask you to consider, what is it that you fear? What is it that you hide? For it is in these shadows that the mastermind lurks, watching, waiting for us to falter." He paused, letting his words settle over the room like a shroud. Then, with a slight bow, he continued, "I shall retire for the evening, but rest assured I am watching. And my little grey cells, they do not sleep." As he turned to leave, Poirot caught a glimpse of movement in the corner of his arja, shadow shifting behind a heavy curtain. His heart quickened, but he gave no sign of having noticed. Instead, he walked calmly toward the door, his mind already racing ahead to the next phase of the game. The mastermind was close, he could feel it, and the clues were beginning to align. But the danger was far from over, and Poirot knew that the next trap was waiting. Ready to spring, the night was restless, the manor's corridors filled with the creaks and groans of an old house settling under the weight of its secrets. Poirot sat at the small desk in his room, a single candle casting a warm glow over the notes he had scribbled during the evening's interrogations. Each guest's name was listed, along with their tells, their contradictions, and the fragments of their stories that did not quite fit. He tapped his pencil against the paper, his mind turning over the puzzle like a jeweler examining a flawed gem. Lady Harrow's letter was a key. He was certain of it. Her reluctance to share its contents suggested it held a clue to her true purpose. Here, Langston's nervous energy pointed to a past mistake, perhaps one tied to the mastermind scheme. Miss Duval's panic at the mention of the financier hinted at a personal connection, one she was desperate to conceal. Dr. Morton's ink-stained fingers suggested he was documenting something, perhaps a defense against an accusation, and Crane's Financial troubles were a motive in themselves, but were they enough to make him the mastermind? Poirot leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing. The mastermind was clever, weaving a web of deceit that ensnared them all. But Poirot was no ordinary prey. He was a hunter of truth, and he would not rest until the mastermind was unmasked. A soft knock at the door startled him from his thoughts. He rose, his hand instinctively moving to the small pocket-knife he kept in his waistcoat a precaution. "Nothing more, Intress," he called, his voice steady. The door opened to reveal Miss Duval, her face pale and her eyes red-rimmed. She clutched a handkerchief, twisting it nervously in her hands. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, "I must speak with you, alone." Poirot gestured to a chair, his expression unreadable. "Of course, mademoiselle, please, sit, and tell me what troubles you." She hesitated, then sank into the chair, her shoulders trembling. I lied earlier, about why I'm here. I didn't come for a social invitation. I came because I was blackmailed." Poirot's eyebrows rose, but he said nothing, waiting for her to continue. "There was a man," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "a financier in Paris. He and I were close, once. But he was married, and when his wife found out, there was a scandal. I thought it was behind me, but then I received a letter. It said if I didn't come here, the truth would be revealed, and my career would be ruined." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. "And this letter, mademoiselle, do you have it?" She nodded, reaching into her sleeve and producing a folded piece of paper. Poirot took it, his fingers brushing against the fine stationery. He unfolded it carefully, his eyes scanning the words. The handwriting was elegant, precise, and unmistakably familiar. It matched the cryptic invitation he had received. "Mercy, mademoiselle," he said, his voice soft but firm. "This is most helpful. But tell me, why come to me now?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Because I'm afraid, Monsieur Poirot. Whoever wrote that letter knows everything about me. And I think they're watching us, even now." Poirot's gaze flicked to the window, where the curtains swayed slightly in the draught. He rose, moving silently to draw them closed, his mind racing. Miss Duval's confession was a breakthrough, but it also raised new questions. Was she truly a victim, or was this another layer of the mastermind's game? And if she was being blackmailed, were the others as well? He turned back to her, his expression calm but resolute. "Rest assured, mademoiselle, I shall protect you, but you must trust me completely. Tell me everything, and together we shall unravel this mystery." She nodded, wiping her eyes, and began to speak, her words tumbling out in a rush of fear and relief. Poirot listened intently, his little grey cells working at fever pitch, piecing together the fragments of truth she offered. The game of motives was far from over, but with each revelation, he was drawing closer to the heart of the mastermind's plan. The next morning, the manor was abuzz with a new tension. The guests gathered for breakfast, but the meal was a sombre affair, the clink of cutlery against porcelain the only sound breaking the silence. Poirot observed them all, noting the way their eyes avoided his, the way their hands trembled as they reached for their coffee. Miss Duval's confession had shifted the dynamic, and he suspected the mastermind knew it. As the meal ended, Poirot rose, his voice cutting through the oppressive quiet. "Madame et messieurs, I have learned much in the past hours, but there is still more to uncover. I urge you, if you have secrets, share them now." For the longer you conceal them, the greater the danger grows." His words were met with silence, but he could feel the weight of their unspoken truths. He excused himself, retreating to the library to review his notes and the letter Miss Duval had given him. The handwriting was a crucial clue, one that linked the blackmail to the mastermind's invitation. But there was something else, something he had overlooked. He spread his notes across the table, his eyes scanning the pages, the letter, the guests. Reactions, the cryptic messages, they all pointed to a pattern. A design so intricate, it could only have been crafted by a mind as brilliant as his own. And then, in a flash of clarity, he saw it, a name, mentioned in passing by Dr. Morton during last night's interrogation. A name that tied to a scandal Langston had alluded to. A name that appeared in the margins of Lady Harrow's letter. Poirot's heart raced as he connected the dots. The mastermind was not just among them, they were orchestrating a symphony of deception, using the guests' pasts as their instruments. But who was the conductor? He needed more time, more clues, to be certain. As he gathered his notes, a scream pierced the air, shattering the morning's calm. Poirot rushed toward the sound, his pulse quickening. The game was escalating, and the mastermind's next move had just been revealed. The scream had come from the conservatory, where Lady Harrow stood, her face ashen, pointing at a small, ornate box on the table. The other guests crowded around, their voices a cacophony of fear and confusion. Poirot pushed through, his eyes locking on the box. It was no ordinary trinket, it was a puzzle box, its surface etched with intricate symbols that matched those he had seen in the locked room riddle. "Calm yourselves," he commanded, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. He approached the box, his fingers tracing the symbols. It was another trap, he was certain of it, but one designed to test not just his intellect but his courage. He turned to the guests, his expression grave. "This is no accident. Our host has left us another challenge. But fear not, I, Hercule Poirot, shall face it." As he began to work on the box, his mind raced, piecing together the motives, the clues, the connections. The mastermind was close, their presence almost tangible. And as the box's mechanisms clicked under his deft fingers, Poirot knew that the game of motives was reaching its climax. The truth was within his grasp, but so was the danger, and he would need all his wits to emerge unscathed. Chapter 8. The second trap springs. The air in the manor felt heavier now, as if the walls themselves were closing in, charged with the mastermind's malevolent intent. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand dining hall, his sharp eyes scanning the faces of the assembled guests. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows, making their expressions seem fleetingly sinister. Though Poirot knew better than to trust mere appearances, his mind, those famous little grey cells, churned with the clues he had gathered, the cryptic symbols etched into the base of a statue, the faint scent of almond-like poison lingering in a glass, and the unsettling revelation that someone among them, someone he had begun to trust, was entwined with the mastermind's scheme. The events of the locked room had left him rattled, though he would never admit it. The memory of the ticking clock, the intricate puzzle, and the cold steel walls that threatened to entomb him still lingered. Yet Poirot had escaped, as he always did, through sheer intellect and a touch of audacity. But the mastermind's chilling message, delivered through a hidden gramophone in the room, had promised that the game was far from over. "You've survived the first test, Monsieur Poirot," the distorted voice had taunted, "but the next will demand more than your cleverness. It will demand your courage." Now, as the guests murmured nervously among themselves, Poirot sensed the mastermind's next move was imminent. The dining hall, with its towering mahogany table and crystal chandelier, seemed an unlikely stage for danger, yet Poirot's instincts told him otherwise. He adjusted his impeccable moustache, a gesture that belied the storm of calculations in his mind, and addressed the group. "Mes Amis," he began, his voice calm but commanding, "it is clear that we are all players in a game most sinister. The mastermind who has brought us here does not merely wish to challenge Hercule Poirot. Nan, they wish to break us all. But I, Poirot, will not be broken, and I urge you to remain vigilant, for the next move is upon us." Lady Eleanor, the elegant widow with a penchant for dramatic gestures, clutched her pearl necklace. "This is madness," she exclaimed. "Why should we stay in this wretched place? We should leave at once." "Leave," barked Colonel Hargrove, his military bearing stiff as ever, "and let this coward win." "I say we hunt them down." "Enough," interrupted Dr. Voss, the quiet German physician whose reserved demeanour had begun to unsettle Poirot. "We are not soldiers, Colonel. We are pawns, as Monsieur Poirot says. Let us listen to him." Poirot nodded, though his eyes lingered on Voss. The doctor's calm was too measured, too controlled. Was it the composure of innocence or the confidence of a conspirator? Before Poirot could probe further, a low, mechanical hum echoed through the room. The guests froze, their eyes darting to the source of the sound. The chandelier above, the crystal prisms began to vibrate, emitting a faint, eerie chime. Then, with a sudden clank, the massive fixture shuddered. Poirot's heart quickened. He stepped back, his hand instinctively reaching for the silver pocket watch he always carried, a habit, not a necessity, for Poirot's sense of time was as precise as his deductions. "Everyone, move away from the table," he shouted, but it was too late. The chandelier's chain snapped with a deafening crack, and the glittering mass plummeted toward the table. Screams erupted as the guests scrambled, chairs toppling in their haste. The chandelier crashed onto the mahogany, sending shards of crystal flying like deadly shrapnel. Poirot dove to the floor, shielding Miss Clara, the young heiress who had been standing closest to him. When the dust settled, the room was a chaos of splintered wood and broken glass. Miraculously, no one appeared seriously injured, though Lady Eleanor was sobbing hysterically, and Mr. Grayson, the American industrialist, was cursing under his breath. Poirot rose, brushing dust from his suit, and surveyed the wreckage. The chandelier's fall was no accident. The chain, he noted, had been cleanly cut, not frayed. "This," Poirot declared, his voice cutting through the panic, "is the mastermind's second trap, but it is not the end. Nan, it is a distraction, a prelude to something far more dangerous." As if on cue, a low hiss filled the room. Poirot's nose twitched at the faint, acrid scent that followed. Gas. His eyes darted to the walls where ornate brass sconces lined the room. One of them, he noticed, was emitting a faint vapor. Quickly, he shouted, "To the windows, open them." The guests, still shaken, hesitated. Poirot strode to the nearest window, only to find it sealed shut, the latch rusted and immovable. The others tried different windows, but each was similarly locked. The hiss grew louder, the air thicker with the invisible threat. Poirot's mind raced. The mastermind had planned this meticulously. The chandelier was meant to trap them in a moment of chaos, and now the gas would finish the job. But Poirot was not one to succumb to panic. He turned to the group, his voice steady. Amos, we must find the source of this gas and stop it. Search the room, look for vents, pipes, anything unnatural." The guests, spurred by his command, began to search. Colonel Hargrove overturned a chair, revealing nothing. Miss Clara ran her hands along the walls, her delicate fingers trembling. Dr. Voss, however, moved with purpose, his eyes scanning the floor. Poirot watched him closely, noting the doctor's focus on a particular corner near the fireplace. "There," Voss called, pointing to a small grate hidden behind a decorative screen. "The gas is coming from here." Poirot joined him, crouching to examine the grate. It was small, barely large enough for a hand to fit through, but the hiss was unmistakable. The gas was odorless now, a sign that the mastermind had adjusted the mixture likely to something more lethal. Poirot's mind flashed to the almond-like scent he had detected earlier. Cyanide. No, too crude for this mastermind. This was something subtler, perhaps a nerve agent. "We must block it," Poirot said. "Quickly, find something to seal the—" "Great." Miss Clara tore a strip from her silk scarf, handing it to Poirot. He pressed it against the grate, but the fabric was too thin, the gas seeping through. Colonel Hargrove, ever practical, ripped a cushion from a chair and stuffed it into the space, slowing the flow but not stopping it entirely. "It will not hold for long," Poirot said, his eyes scanning the room for another solution. His gaze fell on a heavy silver tray on a sideboard, its surface gleaming in the dim light. "Colonel, help me." Together they dragged the tray to the grate, pressing it firmly against the opening. The hiss diminished, then stopped. The air, though still heavy, began to clear as the guests opened their mouths to breathe more freely. But Poirot knew this was only a temporary reprieve. The mastermind would not be so easily thwarted. "We must leave this room," Poirot said. "The gas may return, and there may be other traps awaiting us." The guests nodded, their faces pale. But as they moved toward the door, a loud click echoed from the far wall. A panel slid open, revealing a narrow passageway shrouded in darkness. The group froze, their eyes turning to Poirot. "A trap," Lady Eleanor whispered, her voice trembling. "Perhaps," Poirot replied, his tone measured, "or perhaps an invitation. The mastermind wishes to play with us further." But Poirot does not shy away from a challenge. He stepped toward the passageway, his polished shoes clicking on the floor. The others hesitated, but Miss Clara, her youthful courage, surprising even Poirot, followed closely behind. "If you're going, Monsieur Poirot, so am I," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. One by one, the others followed, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous hall. The passageway was narrow, its stone walls damp and cold. A single lantern hung from a hook, casting a feeble glow. Poirot took it, holding it aloft as he led the way. The air grew colder, the scent of earth and mould replacing the acrid gas. The passage twisted and turned, descending slightly, as if leading to the manor's underbelly. After what felt like an eternity, the passage opened into a small chamber. The walls were lined with shelves, each holding strange artifacts, glass vials, old books, and mechanical devices that looked like relics from a bygone era. In the center of the room stood a table, and on it a single object, a brass puzzle box, its surface etched with intricate symbols. Poirot approached cautiously, his eyes narrowing. The symbols matched those he had found earlier, hidden in the manor's decor. This was no coincidence. The box was the key to the mastermind's next move. "Do not touch it," Poirot warned. as Mr. Grayson reached out. "This is a trap, monsieur, as surely as the chandelier and the gas. We must study it first." The group gathered around, their faces illuminated by the lantern's glow. The puzzle box was a masterpiece of craftsmanship, its surface covered in interlocking gears and sliding panels. Poirot's fingers itched to solve it, but he knew better than to act impulsively. The mastermind was watching, waiting for a mistake. Dr. Vos Poirot said, turning to the physician, "You are a man of science. Have you seen such a device?" Before, Vos adjusted his spectacles, peering at the box. "It resembles a cryptographic puzzle, perhaps from the last century. But the mechanism, it is more complex than anything I've encountered." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. The box was a test, but of what? His intellect, his patience, or something more personal? He recalled the mastermind's taunt, "This will demand your courage." The box, he realized, was not just a puzzle, it was a trap designed to exploit his greatest strength, his confidence in his own mind. "Everyone, step back," Poirot said. "I will solve this, but I must do so alone." The guests hesitated, but Colonel Hargrove nodded. "Do what you must, Poirot. We trust you." Poirot knelt beside the table, his eyes locked on the box. He traced the symbols with a gloved finger, noting their sequence. They formed a pattern, a code that hinted at a sequence of movements. Slowly, methodically, he began to manipulate the gears, sliding panels and turning dials. Each click brought a new configuration, a new challenge. His mind was a whirlwind of logic, piecing together the puzzle with surgical precision. But as he worked, a faint ticking began to emanate from the box. The sound grew louder, more insistent. Poirot's pulse quickened, but he forced himself to remain calm. The mastermind was testing him, pushing him to the edge. He could not afford to falter. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The guests watched in silence, their breaths held. Finally, with a soft click, the box sprang open, revealing a small glass vial inside. The liquid within glowed faintly, a sickly green that sent a chill down Poirot's spine. Before he could examine it further, the chamber shuddered. Dust fell from the ceiling, and a low rumble echoed through the walls. The ground beneath them tilted, and Miss Clara screamed as the shelves began to topple. "The manor!" Colonel Hargrove shouted. "It's collapsing." Poirot grabbed the vial, tucking it into his pocket, and gestured to the passageway. "Go back the way we came." The group scrambled, their footsteps pounding as the chamber shook. Poirot brought up the rear, his mind racing. The box had been a trigger, activating a mechanism that threatened to bury them alive. The mastermind's plan was not just to outwit him, but to destroy them all. As they reached the passageway, a deafening crack split the air. The ceiling above began to cave, stones tumbling into the chamber they had just left. Poirot pushed Miss Clara forward, urging the others to run faster. The lantern flickered, casting wild shadows as they navigated the twisting passage. Finally, they burst back into the dining hall, coughing and gasping. The manor groaned, but the immediate danger seemed to have passed. Poirot clutched the vial, his mind already analyzing its contents. It was a clue, perhaps the key to the mastermind's identity. But it had come at a cost. He turned to the guests, his expression grim. "The mastermind has escalated the game, Mies Amos. This vial, this trap-it, is personal. They know me, and they know my methods. But I, Hercule Poirot, will not be defeated." As the group caught their breath, Poirot's eyes scanned their faces. The mastermind was among them, he was certain. The betrayal he had uncovered earlier, the hidden clues, the taunting message all pointed to someone in this very room. But who? Dr. Voss, with his uncanny calm, Colonel Hargrove, whose bravado seemed too convenient, or perhaps Miss Clara, whose courage masked a deeper secret. The game was far from over, and Poirot knew the next move would be the most dangerous yet. He adjusted his tie, his resolve unshaken. The mastermind had sprung their second trap, but Hercule Poirot was ready for the third. The hours that followed were a blur of tension and suspicion. The guests, shaken by the near collapse of the chamber, retreated to their rooms. But Poirot remained in the dining hall, the vial in his hand. He examined it under the flickering light of a salvaged candle, noting its weight, the faint etchings on the glass. The liquid inside was no ordinary poison. It was too refined, too deliberate. A chemist, perhaps, or someone with access to rare substances. Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. It was Miss Clara, her face pale but determined. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I found something in my room. I think it's meant for you." She held out a small envelope, its surface marked with the same cryptic symbols as the puzzle box. Poirot took it, his fingers steady despite the surge of adrenaline. The mastermind was bold, leaving clues in plain sight. He opened the envelope, revealing a single sheet of paper with a handwritten message. "Well played, Monsieur Poirot. But the game grows more perilous. The vial is but a piece of the puzzle. Find the heart of the manor, or all will perish by dawn." Poirot's eyes narrowed. The heart of the manor, a metaphor, perhaps, or a literal location. He glanced at Miss Clara, her wide eyes betraying both fear and curiosity. Could she be trusted, or was this another layer of the mastermind's deception? "Come," he said, rising. "We must find this heart before it is too late." Together they ventured into the manor's labyrinthine halls, the candle casting long shadows. The air was thick with the weight of secrets, and Poirot knew that every step brought him closer to the truth, to his doom. The manor seemed to pulse with a life of its own, its creaking floors and whispering draughts, like the breath of the mastermind. Poirot led Miss Clara through a series of corridors, his mind mapping the layout of the house. The heart of the manor, he reasoned, would be a place of significance, perhaps a central room, a hidden chamber, or even a symbolic core tied to the mastermind's motives. They paused at a grand staircase, its banister carved with intricate vines. Poirot's eyes caught a faint irregularity in the wooden panel that seemed slightly askew. He pressed it, and with a soft click, a hidden door swung open, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. "The heart," Poirot murmured. "It lies below." Miss Clara hesitated, but Poirot's steady gaze reassured her. They descended, the air growing colder with each step. The staircase ended in a heavy iron door, its surface etched with the same symbols as the puzzle box and the envelope. Poirot's heart raced, but his expression remained impassive. This was the mastermind's sanctum, the core of their plan. He pushed the door open, revealing a vast chamber lit by a single chandelier, smaller than the one in the dining hall, but no less ominous. In the center stood a pedestal, and on it a mechanical device unlike anything Poirot had seen. It was a clock, but not a clock. Kit's gears whirred with unnatural speed, and a series of levers and dials suggested a purpose far more sinister than telling time. Poirot approached, the vial still in his pocket. The device's surface was inscribed, with a message, insert the key, or the heart stops at dawn. The vial, it was the key, Poirot realized. But what would it unlock? A solution, or another trap? He turned to Miss Clara, his voice low. Mademoiselle, stay back. This is a matter for Poirot alone. She nodded, stepping back as Poirot carefully removed the vial. The device had a small slot, perfectly sized for the glass. His fingers hovered, his mind weighing the risks. The Mastermind had anticipated his every move, but Poirot was no ordinary opponent. He inserted the vial, and the device hummed to life, its gears slowing to a steady rhythm. A panel in the wall slid open, revealing a map of the manor. Red lines marked a series of rooms, each connected by hidden passages. At the center was a single word, checkmate. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. The Mastermind thought they had won, but Poirot was not so easily defeated. The map was a clue, a guide to the final confrontation. He memorized its details, then turned to Miss Clara. We return to the others, he said. But first, we must prepare. The Mastermind believes they have outplayed Hercule Poirot. They are mistaken. As they ascended the staircase, the manor groaned once more, a reminder of the danger that lurked within. Poirot's mind was a storm of deductions, each piece of the puzzle falling into place. The vial, the map, the trapsaw were part of a grand design, but Poirot was no pawn. He was the master of this game, and he would see it through to the end. The night was far from over, and the Mastermind's final move awaited. Chapter 9. The Hidden Passage. Hercule Poirot stood in the dimly lit library of Blackthorn Manor, his keen eyes scanning the towering bookshelves that lined the walls. The events of the past few days had left him both exhilarated and wary. The Mastermind's game was a labyrinth of deception, and each step forward seemed to pull him deeper into a web of intrigue. The air was thick with the scent of aged leather and dust, and the silence was broken only by the faint creak of the manor's ancient timbers settling in the night. His fingers brushed against the spine of a particularly worn volume of the Count of Monte Cristo, and he paused, his instincts tingling. Something about this room felt ... off. The guests had retired to their rooms after the harrowing events of the second trap, where Poirot had narrowly saved young Emily Harwood from a collapsing chandelier rigged to fall. The Mastermind's audacity was growing, and Poirot knew that time was not on his side. The clues he had uncovered, thus far cryptic notes, a monogrammed handkerchief, and a peculiar sketch of a raven pointed to a mind that delighted in complexity. But complexity, Poirot mused, was often the downfall of such minds. The key was to find the thread that unravelled the tapestry. He paced the length of the library, his polished shoes clicking softly against the parquet floor. The room was vast, its high ceilings adorned with ornate plasterwork, and its windows shuttered against the stormy night outside. A single candelabrum flickered on the table, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. Poirot's mind worked methodically, piecing together the fragments of the puzzle. The Mastermind was among them, hidden in plain sight, and the manor itself seemed to hold secrets that begged to be uncovered. As he approached the fireplace, a massive stone structure, carved with intricate vines and roses, he noticed a faint draught. It was subtle, barely perceptible, but to Poirot's finely tuned senses, it was as loud as a shout. He crouched, his knees protesting slightly, and examined the hearth. The fire had long since died, leaving only cold ashes, but the draught suggested something more, a hidden passage, perhaps. Such architectural tricks were not uncommon in manors of this age, built by paranoid aristocrats guarding their wealth or their secrets. Poirot's fingers traced the carvings, searching for a mechanism. His mind flashed back to the cryptic message from the mastermind's first move. The truth lies where shadows meet stone. At the time, he had dismissed it as poetic nonsense, but now it seemed to carry weight. Shadows and stone. The fireplace was the most prominent stone structure in the room, and the candelabrum's light cast shadows that played across its surface. He moved the candelabrum closer, watching as the shadows shifted. There, near the base of the hearth, a small rose carving seemed to catch the light differently, its edges slightly more worn than the rest. With a gentle press, the carving gave way, and a low grinding sound echoed through the library. The back panel of the fireplace slid aside, revealing a narrow, dark passage. Poirot's heart quickened, not with fear, but with the thrill of discovery. This was no mere coincidence. The mastermind had left a trail, whether intentionally or not, and Poirot was determined to follow it. He retrieved a small flashlight from his Paquita habit, born of years of unexpected adventures, and stepped into the passage. The air was cool and damp, carrying the musty scent of earth and stone. The walls were rough-hewn, and the passage sloped downward, suggesting it led to a lower level of the manor, perhaps a cellar or a forgotten chamber. Poirot moved cautiously, his light illuminating cobwebs and the occasional scurry of a startled spider. His mind raced, cataloguing every detail, the passage's age, its construction, and its purpose. Was this the mastermind's escape route, or a means to move unseen? Through the manor, after a few minutes, the passage opened into a small chamber, no larger than a modest bedroom. The walls were lined with shelves, and on those shelves sat an array of objects that made Poirot's breath catch. There were files, meticulously labelled with names and dates, alongside photographs, maps, and what appeared to be coded letters. A dusty table in the centre held a typewriter, its keys stained with ink, and a stack of papers covered in cryptic symbols. This was no mere hideaway. It was a command centre, the nerve hub of the mastermind's operation. Poirot approached the table, his eyes narrowing as he examined the papers. The symbols were unfamiliar, a mix of letters and numbers interspersed with geometric shapes. He recognized a cipher when he saw one, but this was no simple substitution code. It would require time and focus to crack, and time was a luxury he did not have. Instead, he turned his attention to the files. Each bore a name, and to his dismay, they corresponded to the guests in the manor. Emily Harwood, Dr. Julian Crane, Lady Beatrice Langley, and the others. There was even a file labelled Hercule Poirot. With a steady hand, he opened his own file. Inside were photographs of him in London, Paris, and even Brussels, taken without his knowledge. There were notes on his habits, his methods, and his known associates: Captain Hastings, Chief Inspector Japp, even Miss Lemon. The level of detail was chilling, suggesting months, if not years, of surveillance. But what struck him most was a single sentence scrawled in red ink across the top page. To outwit Poirot is to outwit the mind itself. The mastermind's obsession was clear, and it was personal. He set the file aside and examined the others. Emily Harwood's file contained medical records and a letter hinting at a scandal in her family's past. Dr. Crane's file detailed his research into rare toxins, with annotations suggesting blackmail. Lady Langley's file was thinner, but included a photograph of her with a man Poirot did not recognize, taken in a compromising setting. Each file was a piece of the puzzle, a lever the mastermind could pull to manipulate the guests. But to what end? As he rifled through the papers, a faint noise reached his ears, soft click, like a door latch. He froze, his senses on high alert. The sound had come from the passage he had entered through. Someone was following him. He extinguished his flashlight and pressed himself against the wall, blending into the shadows. His hand slipped into his pocket, grasping the small revolver. He carried 4 emergencies. Poirot was not a man of violence, but he was no fool either. The footsteps grew closer, deliberate and measured. A figure emerged into the chamber, holding a lantern that cast a warm glow across the stone walls. It was Dr. Julian Crane, his gaunt face pale in the flickering light. His eyes widened as he saw Poirot, and he raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. "Monsieur Poirot," Crane whispered, his voice trembling, "I didn't expect to find you here." "Nor I you, Doctor," Poirot replied, stepping into the light but keeping his hand near his revolver. "Why are you here, in this hidden place, at such an hour?" Crane hesitated, his eyes darting to the files on the table. I suspected there was more to this manor than met the eye. After the chandelier incident, I couldn't sleep. Saw you enter the library and followed. I mean you no harm, I swear. Poirot studied him, his little grey cells working overtime. Crane's explanation was plausible, but his presence here, in the mastermind's lair, was too convenient. Was he an ally, a victim, or the mastermind himself? Poirot decided to test him. "You are a man of science, Doctor," he said smoothly. "Tell me, what do you make of these papers? A cipher, perhaps?" Crane approached the table, his lantern, illuminating the cryptic symbols. He frowned, his fingers tracing the lines. "It's complex," he murmured. "Possibly a Polybius square combined with a transposition cipher. But I'd need more time to be certain." Poirot nodded, noting Crane's familiarity with cryptography. It was another piece of the puzzle, but not enough to confirm or dismiss his suspicions. "We must be cautious," he said. "This chamber is a treasure trove of secrets, but it is also a trap. The mastermind does not leave such things unguarded." As if on cue, a low rumble echoed through the chamber, and dust fell from the ceiling. The passage they had entered through began to close, the stone door sliding shut with a grinding finality. Poirot's heart sank. Another trap, and this time he had walked right into it. "Quickly, Doctor," Poirot barked, rushing to the shelves. "Search for a mechanism, a lever, anything." Crane scrambled to the opposite wall, his lantern swinging wildly. Poirot's fingers flew over the shelves, pulling books and objects in search of a hidden switch. The air grew thick with dust, and the rumble grew louder, suggesting the chamber itself might collapse. His mind raced, recalling the manor's layout. If this chamber was below the library, there might be another exit, perhaps leading to the cellars or an external passage. His hands found a small statuette of a raven, identical to the sketch he had found earlier. With a twist, it clicked, and a section of the wall slid open, revealing another passage. "This way," Poirot shouted, grabbing a handful of files and shoving them into his coat. Crane followed, his lantern barely keeping. Up as they plunged into the new passage. The tunnel was narrower, its walls damp and moscovied. Poirot's flashlight flickered, its battery weakening, but he pressed on, driven by the need to survive and the burning desire to unmask the mastermind. The passage twisted and turned, eventually leading to a rusted iron ladder that ascended to a trapdoor. Poirot climbed first, his muscles straining as he pushed against the heavy door. It gave way with a groan, and he emerged into the manor's wine cellar, surrounded by dusty bottles and wooden crates. Crane followed, panting heavily. "That was too close," he gasped. "Do you think the mastermind knows we found the chamber?" Poirot's eyes narrowed. "The mastermind knows everything, Doctor, but so do I now. These files," he patted his coat, "are the key. They will lead us to the truth." They made their way back to the main house, careful to avoid detection. Poirot's mind was a whirlwind of theories. The files suggested the mastermind had leverage over every guest, but why? Was it blackmail, revenge, or something more sinister? And Crane's presence in the chamber coincidence or calculation? Poirot resolved to keep the doctor close, at least until he could discern his true role. Back in his room, Poirot spread the files across his desk, his candle burning low as he pored over them. The ciphered papers were a challenge, but he was confident he could crack them given time. The photographs and notes painted a picture of a mastermind who had studied their targets meticulously, exploiting their weaknesses. But Poirot was no ordinary target. His little grey cells were his weapon, and he would not rest until the game was won that as dawn broke. Casting pale light through the manor's windows, Poirot made a silent vow. The hidden passage had given him the upper hand, but the mastermind's next move was imminent. The taunt, the ticking clock, the final trapple were coming, and Hercule Poirot would be ready. The chapter continued to unfold as Poirot delved deeper into the files. Cross-referencing names, dates, and motives, he sketched a timeline of the mastermind's actions, noting the connections between the guests. Emily Harwood's scandal involved a disputed inheritance, which tied to Lady Langley's financial troubles. Dr. Crane's research into toxins suggested a possible murder weapon, perhaps linked to the poisoned wine Poirot had detected earlier. Each clue was a thread, and Poirot wove them together with precision. He spent hours in his room. The files spread before him like a battlefield. The ciphered papers were his greatest challenge. He recognized elements of a Vigenère cipher, but the geometric shapes added a layer of complexity. Using a pencil and paper, he tested various keys, starting with words like mastermind and raven. Progress was slow, but each breakthrough brought him closer to the truth. By midday, he had decoded a portion of one letter, revealing a chilling instruction: eliminate the Belgian at all costs. The Belgian, of course, was Poirot himself. The mastermind's intent was clear, but their identity remained elusive. Poirot considered each guest in turn. Lady Langley's poise hid a desperate need for money. Dr. Crane's expertise in poisons was suspicious, but his fear in the chamber seemed genuine. Emily Harwood was too young, too naive, to orchestrate such a scheme, or was she? The others, Mr. Reginald Voss, the brusque businessman, Mrs. Clara Dunham, the sharp-tongued widow, and Captain Alistair Reed, the retired soldier, each had their secrets, but none stood up to scrutiny as the mastermind. Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. It was Emily, her face pale and her hands trembling. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, "I found something in my room." A note slipped under the door. She handed him a folded paper, its edges crumpled. Poirot unfolded it, his eyes scanning the familiar handwriting. "The raven watches, but the hawk strikes. Trust no one." The raven again. Poirot's mind flashed to the statuette, the sketch, the files. The mastermind was taunting him, but why warn Emily? Was she a pawn, or was this another layer of deception? "Mercy, mademoiselle," Poirot said, his voice calm but firm. "You must stay close to me now. The game grows dangerous." Emily nodded, her eyes wide with fear. Poirot escorted her to the drawing room, where the other guests were gathered, their faces a mix of suspicion and unease. He announced his discovery of the hidden chamber, watching their reactions closely. Lady Langley gasped, her hand fluttering to her chest. Dr. Crane's jaw tightened, and Voss's eyes narrowed. Mrs. Dunham muttered something about ghastly old houses, while Captain Reed remained stoic, his military bearing unshaken. "I have uncovered evidence," Poirot declared, "that points to the mastermind's identity, but I require your cooperation. Tonight we will dine together, and I will lay my cards on the table." The guests murmured, their tension palpable. Poirot knew he was taking a risk, but he needed to provoke a reaction. The mastermind was among them, and the hidden passage had given him the leverage he needed to force their hand. That evening, the dining room was a stage for Poirot's performance. The long table was set with silver and crystal, but the atmosphere was heavy with dread. Poirot stood, his moustache impeccably groomed, his demeanor unruffled. "Mes amis," he began, "the mastermind has played a clever game, but they have underestimated Hercule Poirot. The hidden passage, the files, the cipher, they all point to one truth. The mastermind seeks to control us through fear and secrets." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But secrets are a double-edged sword. I have learned much, and tonight I will reveal the mastermind's identity." A gasp rippled through the room, and Poirot's eyes darted from face to face. The trap was set, and the mastermind would either strike or flee. Either way, Poirot was ready. The chapter drew to a close with the tension at its peak. The guests poised on the edge of revelation, and Poirot's little grey cells working at their finest. The hidden passage had been a turning point, but the game was far from over. The mastermind's taunt awaited, and Poirot knew that the next move would be the most dangerous yet. Chapter 10. The mastermind's taunter air in the manor's grand library was thick with tension, the kind that settles into the bones and makes every creak of the old house sound like a whispered threat. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small, precise frame a stark contrast to the towering bookshelves that lined the walls, their leather-bound volumes gleaming faintly in the firelight. His mustache twitched slightly, a telltale sign of the storm of thoughts whirling within his little grey cells. The other guests, 7 in total, each a puzzle piece in this deadly game, stood or sat in a loose semicircle, their faces a gallery of suspicion, fear, and guarded curiosity. The storm outside raged on, rattling the tall windows, as if nature itself were an accomplice to the mastermind's scheme. Only moments ago, Poirot had emerged from the secret passage he'd discovered, behind a false panel in the dining room. The passage, damp and narrow, had led to a hidden chamber filled with cryptic notes, mechanical sketches, and a single taunting clue, a pocket watch, its hands frozen at 5 minutes to midnight. The discovery had confirmed what Poirot had suspected. Since the first trapper locked room with a ticking mechanism that had nearly cost him his life, the mastermind was not merely playing a game. They were orchestrating a symphony of chaos, with Poirot as the unwilling conductor, now as the group awaited his next move. A low hum emanated from a gramophone in the corner, its needle scratching to life without warning. The guests froze, their eyes darting to the machine. Poirot's gaze sharpened, his hands clasped behind his back as he tilted his head, listening. The voice that emerged was distorted, metallic, and unmistakably deliberate, a voice engineered to conceal its owner's identity, yet dripping with arrogance. "Monsieur Poirot," it began, the words slithering through the room like a venomous snake. "You have danced admirably through my little diversions, but the stage is set for the final act. You think yourself clever, do you not? The great detective, unraveling mysteries with a flourish of your moustache. But I am no common criminal. I am your equal, nay, your superior. This manor is my board, and you are but a pawn. Solve my final riddle, or the consequences will be catastrophic." The gramophone clicked off, leaving a silence so heavy it seemed to press against the walls. Poirot's eyes flicked to the guests, noting their reactions. Lady Evelyn, the sharp-tongued aristocrat, clutched her pearls, her face pale. Dr. Kessler, the German scientist with a penchant for cryptic remarks, adjusted his spectacles, his expression unreadable. Captain Harrow, the retired military man, gripped the arm of his chair, his knuckles white. Miss Clara, the young heiress, bit her lip, her eyes wide with fear. Mr. Langley, the American businessman, shifted uncomfortably, his tie loosened as if it choked him. Mrs. Patel, the reserved widow, stared at the floor, her hands folded tightly in her lap. And then there was Mr. Finch, the enigmatic writer, whose faint smile suggested he found the situation more intriguing than terrifying. Poirot cleared his throat, drawing all eyes to him. "Mies Amos," he said, his voice calm yet commanding. "The mastermind seeks to unnerve us, to make us doubt, but Hercule Poirot does not falter. This taunt, it is but a smokescreen, a distraction from the truth that lies within our grasp. We must proceed with clarity and precision." Captain Harrow snorted, his voice gruff. "Clarity. The devil's toying with us, Poirot. That voice could be any one of us, or none. How do you propose we find this mastermind when they're hiding? Behind tricks and traps?" Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. "The mastermind is clever, but not infallible. They have left clues, as all criminals do, for the ego demands it. This gramophone message is not merely a taunt. It is a window into their mind. They crave recognition, to be seen as my equal. This is their weakness." Miss Clara spoke, up, her voice trembling. "But what if they're watching us right now? What if they're one of us?" The room erupted in murmurs, glances darting suspiciously. Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mind racing. The possibility had not escaped him. The mastermind's intimate knowledge of the manor, the guests, and even Poirot's methods suggested someone close, someone in this very room. But who? Enough. Lady Evelyn snapped, her voice cutting through the chatter. "This is madness. I came here for a weekend of intellectual discourse, not to be terrorized by some maniac with a flair for theatrics. Poirot, you must do something. Maze." "Oui, Lady Evelyn," Poirot replied, his tone soothing yet firm. "And I shall. But first, we must understand the nature of this taunt. The mastermind speaks of a final riddle and catastrophic consequences. This suggests a deadline, a moment of reckoning. We must search the manor for any sign of this final trap." Dr. Kessler leaned forward, his voice low and measured. "The manor is vast. Herr Poirot, where do we begin? The passage you found, perhaps it holds more secrets." Poirot nodded. "A sound suggestion, Doctor. The passage is but one thread in this tapestry. We must also examine the gramophone itself. It may hold physical evidence of fingerprint, a scratch, a clue to its operator. The group dispersed under Poirot's direction, some reluctantly, others with grim determination. Captain Harrow and Mr. Langley were tasked with inspecting the gramophone, while Mrs. Patel and Miss Clara searched the library for hidden compartments. Lady Evelyn, insisting she was too rattled to be useful, remained by the fire, though Poirot noted her sharp eyes scanning the room. Dr. Kessler and Mr. Finch accompanied Poirot back to the secret passage, their footsteps echoing in the manor's cavernous halls. The passage, accessed through the dining room's false panel, was a claustrophobic tunnel of stone, its walls slick with moisture. Poirot's flashlight cast long shadows, revealing cobwebs and the faint outline of footprints in the dust, his own from earlier, but also others, older and less distinct. The chamber at the passage's end was small, its walls lined with shelves holding papers, diagrams, and strange mechanical devices. The pocket watch still lay on the table, its frozen hands a silent taunt. Fascinating, Mr. Finch murmured, his fingers tracing a diagram of what appeared to be a complex lock mechanism. This mastermind has a penchant for engineering. These sketches look at the precision, almost artistic. Dr. Kessler peered over his shoulder, his brow furrowed. Jar, but to what end? These devices traps, perhaps, or something larger. Poirot's eyes gleamed in the dim light. Precisement, Doctor. The mastermind does not merely wish to trap me. They wish to prove their genius. These sketches, this watch, they are pieces of a larger puzzle. But what is the picture they form? As they sifted through the papers, Poirot's mind worked furiously. The gramophone message had been recorded, not live, which meant the mastermind had planned this moment well in advance. The distorted voice suggested a desire to conceal identity, but the choice of words, my equal, nay, my superior, betrayed a personal stake. This was no distant adversary. This was someone who knew Poirot, who resented his reputation. A sudden shout from the library interrupted his thoughts. The trio hurried back, emerging into the chaos of raised voices. Captain Harrow stood by the gramophone, holding a small brass key, his face flushed with excitement. Found this tucked inside the gramophone's base, he said, holding it up. No idea what it unlocks, but it's got to mean something. Poirot took the key, turning it over in his gloved hands. It was small, intricately designed, with a tiny engraved symbol, crescent moon. His eyes narrowed. This is no ordinary key, Captain. It is a piece of the mastermind's game. We must find what it unlocks. Mrs. Patel, who had been searching a bookshelf, called out softly, Monsieur Poirot, here there's a locked drawer in this desk. The keyhole, it looks like it might fit. The group gathered around the ornate desk near the fireplace. Poirot inserted the key, and with a soft click, the drawer slid open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, its edges yellowed, bearing a handwritten riddle in elegant script. In the heart of the manor, where shadows dwell, lies the truth you seek. In a place you know well, 5 steps forward, then 3 to the right, turn and face the dark. In the absence of light, what you find will bind or set you free. Choose wisely. Poirot, for time flees from thee. Poirot read the riddle aloud, his voice steady despite the growing unease in the room. A challenge, mise, amis. The mastermind directs us to a specific place in the manor. We must decipher this riddle carefully. Miss Clara clutched Mrs. Patel's arm. The heart of the manor. Could it be the central hall, where the chandelier is? Possible. Poirot mused, but the reference to shadows and absence of light suggests a place less illuminated. The cellar, perhaps. Lady Evelyn scoffed. The cellar, that damp, dreadful place. Surely you're not suggesting we traipse down there? Poirot's smile was thin. If the mastermind wishes to test Hercule Poirot, they will not make it easy. The cellar is a likely candidate. We shall investigate. The group descended into the manor's underbelly, their footsteps echoing on the stone steps. The cellar was a labyrinth of crates, barrels, and forgotten relics, lit only by flickering lanterns. Poirot moved methodically, counting steps as per the riddle's instructions. 5 forward, 3 to the right. He paused, turning to face a darkened corner where the lantern's light barely reached. There, set into the wall, was a small iron door, its surface rusted but sturdy. The absence of light, Poirot murmured. This must be it. The brass key fit perfectly into the door's lock. With a groan, the door swung open, revealing a small alcove. Inside was a wooden box, its lid carved with the same crescent moon symbol. Poirot opened it cautiously, revealing a delicate glass vial filled with a clear liquid, a folded note, and a small, intricate device that resembled a miniature clockwork. Mechanism, the note read. 1 sip to live, 1 sip to die. Choose correctly, or your fate is nigh. Poirot's heart sank. The mastermind's game had escalated to a deadly new level. The vial's contents were a mystery, and the clockwork device suggested a timer perhaps linked to the catastrophic consequences the mastermind had promised. He turned to the group, his expression grave. We are at a crossroads, mes amis. This vial, this device, they are the mastermind's final challenge. We must analyze them carefully, but we must also consider the possibility of another trap. Dr. Kessler stepped forward, his scientific curiosity piqued. May I examine the vial? I have some knowledge of chemistry. Perhaps I can identify the liquid. Poirot hesitated, then nodded. Proceed with caution, Doctor. The mastermind is not to be underestimated. As Kessler carefully lifted the vial, Poirot's mind raced. The riddle, the key, the vial pointed to a meticulously planned scheme. But the mastermind's taunt lingered in his thoughts. Your equal, nay, your superior. Whoever they were, they had studied Poirot, anticipated his methods. The betrayal he'd uncovered earlier, Mr. Langley's secret correspondence with an unknown party, suggested a web of deception. But was Langley the mastermind, or merely a pawn? The cellar's chill seeped into Poirot's bones as he watched Kessler work. The other guests stood in a tense semicircle, their faces a mix of fear and fascination. Mr. Finch, ever the observer, jotted notes in a small journal, his eyes flicking between Poirot and the vial. Mrs. Patel whispered a prayer under her breath. Captain Harrow paced, muttering about traps and ambushes. Miss Clara clung to Lady Evelyn, who, for once, seemed too shaken to protest. Kessler held the vial to the light, swirling its contents. It's odorless, he said, frowning. Could be water, could be poison. Without a proper lab, I cannot be certain. Poirot nodded, his mind turning to the clockwork device. He lifted it carefully, noting its weight and the faint ticking sound within. This is no mere ornament, he said. It is a timer, perhaps linked to the manor's infrastructure, a bomb, a release mechanism. We must assume the worst. The group gasped, and Lady Evelyn clutched her chest. A bomb in this house. We must leave at once. Nan, Poirot said sharply. To flee is to play into the mastermind's hands. They expect panic. We must remain calm and use our reason. He turned the device over, noticing a small slot where another key might fit. The crescent moon symbol appeared again, etched into the metal. "This device is incomplete," he said. "There is another piece to this puzzle, another key. We must return to the manor and search." The group retraced their steps, the weight of the riddle and the vial's ominous warning pressing on them. Back in the library, Poirot directed a thorough search, his eyes scanning every detail. It was Mr. Finch who found it a hidden compartment. In the gramophone's base, containing a second brass key, identical to the first, but with a different symbol, a star. "Two keys, two symbols," Poirot said, holding them up. "The moon and the star. They are paired, like the Mastermind and myself. But what do they unlock?" The answer came in a flash of insight. Poirot strode to the fireplace, where a decorative panel bore carvings of celestial symbols, moons, stars, and suns. He pressed the moon symbol, then the star, and with a soft click, the panel slid aside, revealing a hidden safe. The second key fit perfectly, and the safe opened to reveal a leather-bound journal and a small, ticking device identical to the one from the cellar. The journal was the Mastermind's manifesto, its pages filled with meticulous plans, sketches of traps, and a chilling narrative. "Hercule Poirot, you are the pinnacle, but I am the shadow that eclipses you. Every trap, every clue, has been a step toward proving my superiority. The final act is yours to play, but know this, the manor will burn, and only one of us will emerge." Poirot's heart raced as he read. The device in the safe was ticking faster now, its mechanism linked to something larger, perhaps gas lines, perhaps explosives. The journal mentioned a heart of the manor, echoing the riddle's words. Poirot's eyes darted to the chandelier in the central hall, visible through the library's open doors. It was the manor's centerpiece, a glittering mass of crystal and metal, suspended by a thick chain. "The chandelier," he said, his voice urgent. "It is the heart of the manor, and it is rigged to fall. The devices, they are triggers." The group rushed to the hall, where the chandelier loomed above, its candles flickering ominously. Poirot climbed the grand staircase, his nimble fingers tracing the chain's anchor point. There, hidden in the ornate moulding, was a third device, its ticking now a deafening pulse. The two, keys moon and star, fit into slots on either side, and with a steady hand, Poirot turned them simultaneously. The ticking stopped, and a soft hiss indicated the device's deactivation. The guests exhaled as one, relief washing over them. But Poirot's work was not done. The journal had revealed the Mastermind's obsession, but not their identity. He turned to the group, his eyes piercing. "The Mastermind is among us," he said. "And they have made one fatal mistake. They underestimated Hercule Poirot." He paced before the group, his voice rising. "The journal speaks of a shadow, a figure who knows my methods intimately. Only one of you has the intellect, the access, and the motive to orchestrate this game. Dr. Kessler, your knowledge of mechanics and chemistry, your cryptic remarks, they betray you." Kessler's face paled, but he laughed, a hollow sound. "Absurd, Poirot. I am a scientist, not a madman." "Nan," Poirot said, stepping closer, "you are both. The sketches in the passage, the precision of the traps, they bear the mark of your expertise. The gramophone's distortion could not hide your faint accent, and the journal its pages mention a grudge, a case from years ago where I exposed your mentor's fraud. You sought revenge, to prove yourself my superior. The group gasped as Kessler's composure cracked. He lunged for the door, but Captain Harrow tackled him, pinning him to the floor. Poirot stood over him, his expression one of quiet triumph. You played a fine game, Doctor, he said. But the little grey cells of Hercule Poirot are not so easily outwitted. As the storm outside began to abate, the guests secured Kessler, and Poirot ensured the manor was safe from further traps. The mastermind's taunt had been his undoing, his need to gloat revealing the clues Poirot needed to unravel the scheme. The manor, once a stage for danger, stood quiet at last, its secrets laid bare by the indomitable detective.